So welcome to the Wednesday, July 18th, 2018 meeting of the Amherst Planning Board. First order of business is minutes. No minutes. Appearance. Sarah laCour, Executive Director of the Amherst Business Improvement District, Town Common Proposed Bandshell Competition. Welcome, Sarah.
It is obviously not me. I'm spelling Sarah tonight because she goes to enough night meetings. I'm John Kuhn, Kuhn-Riddle Architects, but I'm wearing my bid hat tonight. I'll be very brief. I know you have a very full agenda. About a year ago, the bid started looking at the notion of creating a permanent bandshell on the common, kind of taken from sketches that were done by Frederick Law Olmsted. We've started down that road and been working on some designs, but there was comments from a number of people that perhaps we should open up the process. And so we thought about creating a competition. And so I'm here tonight because we're getting ready to send out the RFP for entries for a bandstand. And I think you got paperwork on that did not go to everybody? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you all had, this is the design, all right, well, the idea is we would have a competition. It would be open to the public. Every entrant would have to have either an architect, an engineer, or a design professional of some sort on the team. We would have a jury of 7 people. That's why I'm here tonight, trying to recruit a jury member from the planning board. The timing of this will be, the RFP will probably go out in sometime late August. I think we'd have entrants due late September, something like that. So there's not a lot of heavy lifting on this person's part. We are looking for members from, well, there'll be 2 from the bid, probably Sarah and myself. Design Review Board, Lindsay Schnarr was recruited last night. Somebody from the Planning Board, somebody from the Historical Commission, 2 other members. We talked about the Select Board, but we may look to some other members. Eric Brody, who's here tonight, had suggested maybe somebody from the Arts Commission. So we're still kind of corralling how the numbers will work out, but we're looking for a group of 7. We will judge the competition. The winner will be awarded $1,500. The bid will be putting up some money, and there's some other possible areas of funding that we'd look to. We're looking for a budget something like $250,000. It would be an open shelter, an open bandshell that would be located on the east side of the common, kind of in front of the Lord Jeffrey Inn. That's where Frederick Law Olmsted originally envisioned it. We will we'll make this a very public process so that while the jury will choose the winners, we'll display them publicly. There will be a People's Choice Award, much like they do in Northampton and some of their design competitions. We don't know that it'll be funded and built, but that would be the hope, that we would be able to raise the money once we have raised expectations and excitement with this process. So I'm only here tonight to ask for you to consider that one of you join our jury, and nothing will really happen until the fall. And you don't need to tell me tonight, but if you give it some consideration, we'd appreciate that.
Just, what's the time frame? So you're going to start in the fall, and then what do you imagine it, how long do you imagine it lasting? And the announcements would be roughly when?
It will probably be, we'd probably give people approximately 4 to 6 weeks, probably 6 weeks. So if let's say we send something out on September 1st, and maybe we would be expecting entrance the middle of October, and then we'd have a couple of weeks to select a winner. And we'd take that time to also display them publicly somewhere. I don't know where yet, but so it might not be till November that somebody is actually awarded the project.
Can I just add that the September 1st to mid-October actually works well with the academic schedule, just in case there's, students, teams that, or I don't know what the qualifications are, but student, faculty teams, whatever.
All right.
And do we want to do this now, or do you want to?
I'd be happy to serve. I'm not an architect, I'm an architectural professional, but
Play one on TV on Wednesday nights? Anyone else interested? I think you'd be awesome.
thank you.
Yeah, so
Going
should
once,
we?
going
should we-
twice?
Yeah, right, you're gone. Perfect.
All right,
Oh. We have one more bidder here.
You know, I may have missed the email in which that RFP was attached.
Yes.
So I would appreciate it if I could get a copy of
I'll
it.
give you this copy. This also, if you want to pass it around, is the map, the original sketches that Mr. Olmsted did. And these are some other documents that just show where the...
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So we're on to item number 3, 705, zoning bylaw renumbering, to see if the planning board will, this is a public hearing, so I have to read the prelude.
Oh,
Oh, no.
Steve, you don't have it memorized?
I know, can you believe it? In accordance with Massachusetts general law, that's as far as I can get. This public hearing is being held. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we're going to do a public hearing on the zoning bylaw. So this is to see if the planning board will vote to request that the town clerk make non-substantive corrections to the Amherst zoning bylaw in accordance with section 11.01 of the Amherst zoning bylaw by renumbering certain sections of Article 3, 4, 5, and 6 to accommodate zoning amendments that have been adopted by town meeting. So we've advertised this as a public hearing, and there you go.
would you like me to explain it?
Yeah.
Most of the changes in the numbering come from changes that were made in the bylaw last year, particularly last fall, when we had the marijuana definitions added. But we also made changes to other sections of the bylaw that in some cases added sections, and in other cases took what was in footnotes and put them into text, and in some cases added definitions. So where the definitions were added, we actually were smart enough to say in the legal ad that we were, and in the warrant, that we were then going to renumber everything that was subsequent to that particular item. But for some of these other things that were footnotes that were moved, and references to, I think it was the cluster subdivision that was moved from Table 3 into the body of the bylaw, we didn't do that. So we're taking care of that now, and we compiled this document here that you have before you when Steve was typing up what had been approved last fall. There was also one item, I believe, that Ms. Pollock in our office found that was not part of last fall's changes, and that would be on what is page 65 of the document that you have in your packets, down at the bottom of the page, having to do with poultry and livestock. The references to those two items down at the bottom of the page should have been changed during an earlier bylaw rewrite, but they weren't. So those two references to 5.014 are incorrect, and they should be 5.013. So other than that, it's pretty much all things that happened in the last year. What you're doing is asking the town clerk to make these.
Yeah. Any questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? I see none. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to request that the town clerk make non-substantive corrections to the Amherst zoning bylaw in accordance with section 11.01 of the Amherst zoning bylaw by renumbering certain sections of Articles 3, 4, 5, and 6 to accommodate zoning amendments that have been adopted by town meeting.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. And did you close the public hearing as part of your motion?
I did not, and I also moved to close the public hearing.
Assume there's a friendly second.
Second.
Yeah. So any discussion of the motion? I see none. All in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously, 6-0. Here we go.
So sorry.
Okay, no. So we're going to move on to the other public hearings. These are for site plan review and special permits. So actually, the first one is a special permit. So I'm sorry, let me get my bearings here for a second. Okay, so in accordance with Massachusetts general laws, I remember that part, Chapter 40A, these public hearings have been duly advertised and notice has been posted in Town Hall and sent to abutters. The hearings are being held to provide the opportunity for interested citizens to be informed about and to comment on the proposed site plans. The first, the first one is SPP Special Permit Planning Board 2018-03 Simple Gifts Farm LLC, 1089 North Pleasant Street. Request a special permit to construct an oversized sign in accordance with section 8.101 of the zoning bylaw, map 5C, parcel 22, RN zoning district. So there is an order that we go through, and the first one is board member disclosures. So my daughter worked at Simple Gifts last summer, but doesn't work there currently. So I feel that I can comment on this application. So then we ask the applicant to give a presentation. So please just introduce yourself and tell us what's going on.
Hi, I'm Dave Tepfer, co-owner of Simple Gifts Farm, and I live around the corner at 255 Pine Street. We built a store there last summer. We'd gone through the whole permitting process for that, and on that original plan, we had the sign on there, and we weren't 100% certain exactly what we were going to have the sign look like, and we knew that was a ways down the road, so for exactly the language, but at that time they said, well, when you do the store, when you're ready to do the sign, apply for an additional special permit. So that's what we're doing now. I think you've got a picture in front of it, and I guess a few of you were out there and looked at it today. We've got a sign that's been in front of the store on North Pleasant Street there for years. It's been cobbled together and added to and shifted around for I'm not sure exactly how long, but most of the 12 years that we've been there. And we're going to put up something that's fairly similar in size, but a lot nicer and a tiny bit farther off the sidewalk. I think it's noted on there where that sign is supposed to be located. I think that's sort of it. Okay. Any questions?
So there was a site visit. Did anyone have questions for Dave? Yeah.
I do. I should have asked this at the site visit, and I didn't think of it. The sign is intended to be two-sided. It'll be the same on both sides?
Yes.
So which end of the sign faces is nearest the street?
Thought of that later. I'm not sure it matters that much, but the little one with the 7 days a week, that'll be on the street side.
That'll be on the street side,
Yeah.
okay. And how far is that from the sidewalk?
I'm not sure if it says on the map.
No, it doesn't.
But far enough that there's no way that that fancy snowplow that the town uses on the sidewalks will hit it, so I guess at least 3 feet or so, 3 to 4 feet. The one that we have is probably barely over 2 feet, and that's too close. So, is there some special number that it's supposed to be off the sidewalk?
Just tagging on that, interesting you asked that. So if I understand the little part,
Mm-hmm.
go towards the street, and at the site visit, which I know we haven't talked about yet, someone mentioned that you had a flag pole on the street
Yeah.
side right now for the open sign, which wasn't there at the time. But would you still, and you said, oh yeah, we might still put one.
We haven't
Does that
actually
make
thought
you
about
wanna
that.
flip this the other way or keep it this way?
We haven't decided that, yeah. It just makes sense that the 7 days a week part would be closer to the street so people could see it. If we put the open sign, I don't know, we'd have to put it on the other side. Yeah. She's talking about a flag that just goes out there during the day when we're open and comes down.
Or can I just, and I hate designing on the fly, but it's either that or you'd have an open
That's
thing
true.
that you hang on the bottom here, but that's another change I don't.
Yeah. We'll see how it,
Too bad we didn't think of any of this when we were out there.
but either way, it'll all be at least, 3 to 4 feet off the street.
So Steve, does that, any of that matter?
Does the flag matter?
Is there a statutory limit in terms of how far that sign needs to be from the sidewalk?
Sign needs to be 30 inches from the back of the sidewalk.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, if we're 3 to 4 feet, we'll be all right then.
Is that post or any part of the sign?
I think it's just any part of the sign that needs to be 30 inches. I can find the exact reference if you...
Well, it would make sense, because when that little V-plow goes flying through there, and you can't always tell exactly where that sidewalk is, because it's kind of flat there, we'd want a little margin of error.
Should we do a report of the site visit? So at least, yeah?
Sorry, I have to ask,
Yeah.
now we're in design. So I do notice on this, the little stick-out part, it says 32 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean your post is gonna be, 65 feet back
Yeah.
or something. Is that what we're running with? Sorry.
Yeah, whatever, 48 plus 32, yeah, 60, 70 inches, yeah.
Does that have to be written somewhere, or like?
Well, right now, we're sort of just discussing, so,
Yeah, I think it'd be clear, any part of the sign would have to be
Yeah.
at least 30 inches from the street, and I'd want it more.
I can do the site visit if you want.
yeah, please.
There were, I think, 3 of us at the time. This was on Tuesday morning. Michael Burtwistle was there, and David Levenstein and myself, along with Christine Bestrup. And we saw the lay of the land, the store's there, everything's in. There's an old sign that has some rickety lighting, but it is downcast. And it was said that there will be, it isn't on this, but there is lighting that will be on it, something a little more permanent and downcast. And there weren't any major questions, just about the size of the sign, and actually what's there, the printed part, if I believe. You think
What?
the printed part that's there right now, you said that actually gets like reused.
Yeah, we'll probably make a new one, but it'll be the
Maybe similar
same,
to that.
same plan, that one's getting a little beat up, but it'll be pretty much the same as that.
And the only other question was about the lighting. So,
Comments about the site visit? Questions from the board? Comments and questions from the public? Applicant's response? Final comments and questions from the public, the applicant, and the board, in that order. So, more discussion?
I move we grant the requested special permit
second it?
and to close the public hearing.
Second it?
Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda is SPR 2018-15, Town of Amherst, care of Leisure Services Supplemental Education, Groff Park, Mill Lane. Request site plan review, approval for improvements to Groff Park, including new playground, splash pad, picnic shelter, shade pavilion, site furnishings, handicap parking, associated walkings, drainage, and landscaping. So any board member disclosures? See none. Applicant's presentation.
Sure, thanks. I'm Nate Malloy, a planner with the town. I'll give a brief introduction, and then Mike Liu from Berkshire Design can walk through the plans. He has a presentation. This project's been a few years in the making. So the Leisure Services and Supplemental Education Department, LSSC, conducted surveys over 2 years ago. They had over, a few hundred responses that started this process in terms of what people wanted in the park. And so the design today has responded to that. It's been to the Design Review Board recently, the Disability Access Advisory Committee, the Conservation Commission on Monday evening. And all along the way, there's been modifications to accommodate, recommendations and comments from those boards and committees. And, the town's received some federal funding for this. The CPA committee, in town meeting also approved a large amount of money for this. So the project is, in schematic plans right now, getting ready to go out to bid. The schedule is for work to start this fall and complete next spring. And as Stephen, the chair, mentioned, it is, the area of focus is just where the playground is, where the previous splash pad was. And, there's maybe some work down below to fix the current pavilion near the river. But the work is really contained to that kind of mid-level section, the flat section near the existing concession or bathroom building. And I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Turn the lights down a bit.
Okay, hi. I'm Michael Liu with the Berkshire Design Group. Excited to work on this project. I'm an old Amherst resident and former user of this park, so I remember some of this play equipment rather well. The proposal is for, as Nate mentioned, in this midsection here, we'll call it, there's the existing park building, the existing playground, and old wading pool, which has since been removed by the town. But the project is basically on this plateau, and let's see, we'll flip through some of these. I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with the site, but one of the features down below is the old picnic pavilion, which is proposed to be replaced. Handicap access from the parking lot is non-compliant, I'll put it that way. So part of the park proposal being fully, wanting the park to be, playground area to be fully accessible, includes improvements for handicap parking and access. So let's get to the plan. We'll get you oriented first. This is the existing park building, and this down here is the location of the existing picnic pavilion, which is proposed to be replaced. But starting off at the arrival, we're proposing to repave this kind of corner portion of the parking lot. Paving would actually, for the parking lot, would actually be reduced. We're going to reorient the parking spaces. Whoops, where's my, so that they're, you pull in head on to the arrival. This is a small arrival plaza into the park. And as you continue up, the grade would carry you up to this level slightly. It's about a, I think it's about a 3.5 foot difference in grade from the building back down to the parking spaces. We had to actually raise that corner of the parking so that we could meet accessibility requirements. The play activity area includes a large playground area shown here in red and blue. red being, red surfacing being the area for older kids, 5 to 12 years old. The blue area being the area for younger kids, 2 to 5-year-old. We are also proposing to include a embankment slide off of the north end of the playground. Next to this existing tree, this is a nice maple right there, which we're retaining. And then as you continue through to the northeast, we have a large splash pad. Again, we have 3 colors on the plan denoting kind of different age activity groups. The blue, again, being for the younger kids. The red, whoops, keep losing this pointer. The red at the kind of northeast end being for older kids up to teen years, and then the yellow area being more of a family gathering space. Of course, kids and people are going to use all the different components in the park, but it's designed so that those some of the spray features and stuff that are more geared to younger age kids are within the blue zone. This splash pad also includes a custom feature which we're designing. It's a small shotcrete raised pool with an overflow and flows down a short stream section into the central drainage. The splash pad is proposed to be a completely enclosed recirculating system. The water would be treated much like a swimming pool. There is staff in town that routinely deal with testing of the water and applying the chemicals necessary to keep that water usable. So doesn't appear to be a problem in town. I think it's a great idea that the town's decided to do this more green use of water to reuse it. As you probably know, a lot of the drain away splash pads in the first season, a lot of municipalities get the water bill, and they're absolutely shocked by how much that is. It's literally in the tens of thousands of dollars on some of the larger splash pads. So we're going to be, in the long run, saving a lot of money with the recirculating system. This proposal also includes an enlarged gathering, shade, and sitting space here. It's planned to just be made out of concrete surface. There's a boulder wall behind cut into the hillside to provide some extra space. There is plenty of room to grade back into the hill and not disrupt the baseball field above, which the backstop is shown over here on the plan. And it also includes an open shade pavilion shown in the brown rectangle. On the plan, it's just shown some various picnic tables. Whatever furnishings are proposed for this area would not be bolted down so that they could be moved aside for other gatherings and events of different kinds. Down below, as I mentioned, the old picnic pavilion that's been there for who knows how long at this point is proposed to be replaced. We are going to replace it with the same exact footprint with a concrete pad on the ground. There's always been complaints of the ground surface being too muddy to use the feature. So we're going to have the concrete pad poured at grade and then the picnic pavilion replaced. Another feature that we're going to include in the design is some seasonal shade sales at the south end of the park building. This park building actually has a concession window, and the concession area has never been used, from what I'm told. So there is an opportunity there, and people have commented that if there was shade there, they would use it. And so if there were some, seasonal or temporary tables put out, chairs or whatever, I think, that could be used in the event that, especially if the concession were to function. Some of these items we are going to be including in the project as alternates, add alternates. Probably the shade sails, the slide is a likely candidate because it's easy to, take that out of the project. And then the picnic pavilion and concrete slab down below would probably, most likely also be an alternate. We are in the riverfront zone to the Fort River. That's indicated by this red line out here. And as Nate mentioned, we've been to the Conservation Commission on Monday night. This project also had to go to Natural Heritage because it's in a priority habitat area to the river. So we can't close Conservation Commission hearing until we hear back from Natural Heritage. That will probably be in early August. We're hoping we can get comments back and address some of the comments from Conservation for the August 8th meeting, I believe, is the first meeting in August. So hopefully we'll have that wrapped up then. We're hoping we get approval from the planning board tonight so we can continue the process and advance these plans to, you know, more of a construction set.
Thank you. Let's see, let's do a report of this on the site visit.
There is a written report in your packets, the material that you got tonight.
Must be on my desk. So I'm just going to go over the, do you want to do it, Chris?
So again, there were three of us. It was also Tuesday morning, but we changed out a couple of so there was Michael Burtwhistle, Jack Jemison, and myself. So we got an update and we walked the site and everything was as described. We talked about different trees that were existing and the shape of them, and I think a couple might be removed towards the parking area. Questions that were asked, should there be more benches and places to sit near the play area and splash pad area for little children, or the 2 to 5? More benches can be added. There will also be a stone wall which can be used as a bench. The seating area can be expanded to include more space for benches. I think that was regarding this, like a little, like, if you point on the, like where the pavement kind of dips in and takes a hard right turn, that area could maybe be expanded. Number 2 is, should a pavilion at the bottom of the hill be replaced? If there is enough money in the budget, it will be included as an alternate. And 3, what material will be used for the ground plane? Rubberized surface material will be used for the playground, which is permeable. Concrete will be used for the splash pad. Walkways will be concrete. And that's about it.
Questions or comments from the board?
I have a question. How firm are these plans relative to the placement of benches and the placement of the wall that Ms. Graham-Holland was talking about? It seems like there were a lot of good suggestions made at the site visit that don't show up in the plans, nor would I have expected them to.
Right.
But where are we relative to that issue?
I think there's still time to rearrange some of the elements. I agree with the assessment that this area could be made more accessible for more people, because it is an area where parents are going to be watching perhaps young kids using the splash pad and the playground. So by realigning the wall so it doesn't have that turn, we can kind of straighten out the wall, if you will, and it will be more focused on a broader area. We talked about perhaps moving some of the benches. We have a number of benches on the pads out on the perimeter of the playground and splash pad area, and we can easily add a few benches or redistribute some of them to this area so that there's more permanent seating for people that don't prefer to sit on the wall. I should mention, I think I mentioned it during the site walk, that this wall's we're planning this only to be a 15 to 18 inch high wall, so that people can use it for seating. And we know that kids are going to want to walk on top of it, so we don't want it to be, of a height that, could be more, kids could be more prone to injury if they were to fall off. So that was the idea, to create that element as a functional element, as well as, an aesthetic, if you will. Using some, we'd like, what I'm envisioning is using the South Amherst basalt stone that's mined up there on the notch. And we have several of those old stones, like right here along the parking lot. And we would like to obviously get some quarried stone that has good, angles and a flatter top that we can abut tightly together so there's not wide cracks in the wall. And that, so you can sit on them and then kids have an easier time walking on them without tripping, for instance. So that's the idea for the wall. There's still time to rearrange or lay it out in a different manner.
Yeah, Jack.
Excuse me. We got an email from Beth Wilson that was distributed, and it talks about, during the site visit we talked, and it seems, are you aware of that email?
Was it the one that she summarized, I think, the conservation hearing of Monday night?
Okay, I didn't realize that there are going to be a fence down there, which is fine, but it.
I didn't get into the restoration aspect. If you're interested, we could talk about that real quickly.
So I'll bring it up as I think with the, it's kind of linked to the river there, and it was just a concern to get more traffic down there, and so it's a good addition. It's kind of a little bit out of our purview, but.
Yeah, I've got a slide, we can look at that area, but basically what I think the proposal is to, the trailhead for Emily Dickinson Trail actually is on site to the north here. It's off this image, but it's kind of up, if you continue in a northeast direction. And what happens is if you go down the embankment, the trail is very well defined if you continue to the north. But if you were to go down the embankment and try to turn to the left and go south along the river, there's portions of the trail that are well defined. I think those are the areas where kind of people have access or kids have made access down the embankment to the river. But the trail to the south is not continuous. It's like broken up, and it's there's lots of it's overgrown, and it eventually peters out. You can't continue walking, for instance, to the bridge, to the old Gristmill Bridge. So kids have made their own paths kind of to access the river, and the idea is to do some plantings up in the above north area near the trail to block off access if you were to be walking south, so you couldn't continue along the river but would be guided up into the park itself, and then to add some plantings along that stretch to further buffer it. I think there was at least one defined access in that area, and it's just a way to kind of control access and to reduce disturbance to that lower level at, basically I'm going to call it at the water level. From that lower picnicking area down to the river, there's probably a drop of 7 or 8 feet. So it's a pretty steep embankment, and, we talked about this with conservation, and we don't really want to touch it. We don't want to try to remove vegetation or add vegetation, because as soon as you break the soil, I think it's going to end up in the river, or it's going to be very susceptible to moving, and being washed into the river. So the embankment seems to be holding. It's not in bad shape. I think from the site walk, we might have only seen one area where it looked like that there was some erosion going on, and that was even up along to the north along the Emily Dickinson Trail. So the idea is to, part of the restoration for the work in the riverfront, which is required, is to do some type of, one of the options, and the only viable option here, is to do native plantings, which will include trees and shrubs to add to the wildlife value. But we can use that vegetation also to kind of control access at certain points. So we're going to, use it to, more or less get a dual purpose out of it.
And I just want to say that the fencing is split rail, something that's used up at Puffer's Pond or in conservation areas. So it's a, split rail fence, and it's used only in, certain areas just to control access, so that the areas that are being revegetated can't, then be trampled. So it's not like we'll put a fence all along the river. There'll be, maybe 5 sections of split rail fence near the trailhead, so people won't wander off the trail, and then there'll be a few sections, where there's being replanting, but it's not as if there's going to be a continuous split rail fence to block access to the river. I mean, it's actually nice that people can access the river. That's not part of this project. But in the future, it could be that, there's some of those access points that have been made, now that could be, improved. So there's actually, improved access, but that's beyond the scope of this project.
David?
Are there now charcoal pits or grills around the picnic, the pavilion, the picnic shelter?
Down below, at the
And
lower level?
At the lower level,
Yeah,
there are
there are a
charcoal
few,
pits.
yeah.
And what's gonna happen with those?
Well, I
They'll
guess-
they'll remain.
yeah. There's nothing happening at the lower level except for replacement of the picnic pavilion and the addition of that concrete pad. Everything else is gonna remain there, including, there's this existing playground area, which has an old swing, some kind of climber and a metal slide. And then next to it, which you might not be able to see, but under this tree, there's this little square is this existing sandbox, which a lot of people have said, that's one of the favorite things at the park. So we're really not doing anything down at the lower level except for, if the budget allows, to replace that picnic pavilion, because it's just old and worn out,
Yeah.
and it's been repaired, too many times.
Other questions or comments? Questions or comments from the public? Back to the board. Chris?
We
Oh.
received a letter
Yes.
from Susan Sheldon. You may wish to hear from her. We do have copies of the letter here, but I don't have enough copies for all of you, so I can pass these copies along. Perhaps you wanted to recognize Ms. Sheldon to make her comments?
Yeah, sure. If you would, you just dum. Read that, yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Susan Sheldon, and I live on Mill Lane. I'm a landscape architect, so I'm really fascinated with your, yeah, and I have some great ideas. I love it. I also have some comments about it with that, but that's not why I'm here, to comment on your design. I'm here, I think you might have another letter from one of my neighbors on our street, Kathy Mullen. She lives closer to the entrance to Groff Park, and I would like to, since she was kind of spearheaded disseminating this information to our street, I'd like to read her letter, if I may.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. Dear Planning Board, I'm writing to request that the town establish lower speed limits and speed bumps on Mill Lane. Other remedies which would keep the road safe and maintain the enjoyment of this scenic road by pedestrians should be implemented. It is critical that this be done in conjunction with the planned playground splash pad. I understand that there is a public hearing scheduled for Wednesday, July 18th, 2018. However, I'm unable to attend. I hope that this letter will be read at the meeting. Reduction of speed limits is needed both because of an anticipated increase in the amount of traffic on Mill Lane combined with already increasing use of the street by cars. The traffic presents a danger to the huge number of families from nearby apartments as well as walkers, runners, and cyclists. Often these people are using the road instead of the sidewalk. There have been 2 accidents that I will note here. They are directly related to the speed of people leaving Groff Park. One occurred a number of years ago when a man drove out of Groff Park, drove off the road, and demolished, the front of the house located at 71 Mill Lane. Last fall, a car sped down the road from the direction of Groff Park, flew up the small embankment in front of my home at 39 Mill Lane. Trees were damaged and parts of the car were strewn all over the lawn. In both instances, had there been walkers, runners, cyclists, or families, there would have been serious bodily damage. Please consider this request as you plan to improve the Groff Park area. Now I'd like to read my letter. Dear Planning Board, I would like to commend our town for making improvements to Groff Park. This will bring more families into the park and provide quality recreational facilities for our community. I am writing to address the traffic speeding on Mill Lane. I live at 145 Mill Lane, just below the crest of the hill, the west side. Cars often come speeding over the crest as I am attempting to exit my driveway. There have been too many close calls. Frequently, there are parents and children on bikes or in strollers, people walking their dogs. Unfortunately for my family, our beloved pet was hit and killed last month by someone driving too fast to avoid her. Mill Lane is a well-used cut-through from West Street to Southeast Street. Now that Groff Park will become even more of a destination, I would ask that the town provide some kind of traffic control, such as signage and speed bumps, to curb speeding. There are also reasons to address the traffic at the eastern end of the street. Not only are people accessing the bike trail, but there are also people working in the community gardens. Hence, the whole length of the street is used by walkers, bikers, and gardeners. There are no sidewalks after the entrance to Groff Park. People are in the road. Increased traffic flow needs to be addressed in the plan for Groff Park improvements. I trust that it will be attended to with appropriate concern. Sincerely, Susan Sheldon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there other public comment?
Well, I guess,
I'm sorry, you'll have to come forward and introduce.
I think Susan might.
Good deal. Yeah, don't even, just come up to the mic, introduce yourself, and then start over.
Yeah, after living on Mill Lane for...
I'm sorry, could you please introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm John Sheldon. I live at 145. Okay. Susan is my partner in life. I've lived there for about 11 years, and I've seen a lot of people hitting that crest of the hill and speeding, and going very fast. But we did just lose our cat to one of those people. I think that something needs to be, some planning needs to go into this. I don't know what the answers are, but the speeding has to be reduced somehow. And there's one other thing, it goes the whole length, you have to pay attention, but especially the entrance coming into Groff Park. And then, well, it really would go the whole length, this kind of attention. When you get to the Southeast Street part and you're trying to leave, you want to turn onto Southeast Street, you come up next to the bridge and there's no visibility, there's very little visibility, but there's also a lot of greenery that just grows wild there that you have to look around. And I'm just wondering if, I don't know if this is the right place to address this, but this comes under the heading of the whole road. If we have something as fantastic as this, we have a very funky road. I realize that it's probably not it's not a road it's not classified as a road, it's classified as a lane, as I understand. So it's basically a one-lane road?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, nobody seems to know this. But I actually believe I learned this at some point, that it's not a road, it's a lane, and a lane is like a dirt road, has the same classification. The reason that they work on it is because it gets used all the time. They could just leave it alone. But I think it needs some attention to be brought up to the level of this wonderful thing that's happening.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Robert Can. I live at 189 Mill Lane, right over the crest on the other side. And I share my neighbor's concerns. I can answer your question, John. What is Mill Lane? It is an 1884 county layout with 1960 town alterations in Amherst Scenic Road. So I don't know if this is the best place to address the road issue, but I share my neighbor's concerns. Thank you.
Just public. Okay. I think Chris had her hand up.
I wanted to make a note that the Transportation Advisory Committee may be the best place to address these concerns. They meet usually twice a month, and they make recommendations to the Select Board about roadways and issues related to roadways and any kind of transportation issues. The way you can get to them is you can either send me something. So if Ms. Sheldon and her neighbor, I think her neighbor already sent me something, but if Ms. Sheldon sends me her letter, or I can actually scan it, I can forward those to the DPW and ask that they be put on the agenda for TAC for consideration.
So I should note that normally a traffic impact report is a normal part of a site plan review process, but in this case, there's a request for a waiver, but normally the traffic impact reports are sort of dealing with congestion at does there need to be a light here, or, something like that. So it doesn't, as far as I know, they don't normally deal with speed. It's more of a increased pressure at intersections issue. Yep.
Did you say somebody's requested a waiver?
Yeah. So the traffic impact report, for example, if this were a shopping center, traffic impact report, we have as a default that the traffic impact report is required. So like in the last case of a sign at Simple Gifts Farm, that was waived. That requirement was waived.
Has that waiver been granted?
Not yet. No, that's a request for, yeah. But hang on one sec. Yeah, but just to explain what a traffic impact report is, it's not a speed limit study. It's more of a studies the level of service. Yeah. Yeah. So it's not a speed. It's not a speed. Sort of. I'm sorry.
In my letter.
You'll have to come up to the mic.
I'm sorry. As I pointed out in my letter, it will become more of a destination
Yep.
with this improved for families. So you're going to have increased traffic.
Yeah.
And I do think it needs to be taken into account.
Yep. Okay.
So this is a perfect thing for the Transportation Advisory Committee, and I do highly recommend that you send either to the DPW or Chris Bestrup or Aaron Hayden, who's the chair. But I do know their next meeting is on July 25th at, it was 4 or 4:30? Was it 4? Yeah, it's 4 or 4:30 in the town room here. And it wouldn't be too late to get this on the agenda, probably.
So just because I've opened up the question, so what a traffic impact report would show is that cars stack up on Mill Lane trying to make a right turn onto West Street or something like that. And so over years of having looked at these, we can sort of instinctively make it, we use basically our experience to, in terms of whether or not to grant a waiver. Yeah, I was going to say, but just, our experience that there will be increased traffic, but likely, and we haven't discussed a waiver yet, but likely not to the degree to require a light or an extra turning lane, on Mill Lane or something like that. But the speed is a different issue, and it's really a kind of a different kind of a, science related to traffic. I stepped into a whole area that I know very little about, speed limits.
Like, don't go there.
I know. Jack.
I live in the neighborhood there, and I know the gentleman that talked about the intersection of Mill Lane with West Street. It's crazy in terms of the visibility there. West Street or Southeast Street? Southeast Street.
Yeah,
sorry.
Southeast Street.
So, I wonder about, again, I'm not aware of what, you mentioned what the traffic study would entail, but it seems to me if there's increased visitors, and is there a number that we're looking at do we have any idea in terms of increased traffic?
Right now, Groff Park, LSC, school groups use it during the summer. Buses go there all the time. A lot of neighbors walk there. So, there's thousands of users now. I can't say that, how much more of an, with a new improved playground splash pad, how much more that would be increased. It's used quite heavily now. I think some of it could be that, we would tell, the town would tell people to use the entrance off West Street and not the Southeast Street. So some of it is just informing people how to get there. So even just, narrative on our website, information on how to arrive at Groff Park could really stress that entrance as opposed to, coming off Southeast Street. So those are things that can be done. But I'm not sure, I don't know that this change in use, I haven't estimated, how many more people would go. South Hadley has 2 spray pads. A lot of the neighboring communities already have some. So this will be the first one in Amherst, and I think it'll be very popular. It'll probably draw some people from other communities, but most of the neighboring communities already have a splash pad. And
I think it'll be highly used, and that I can't say how long, but that first, the first opening, maybe the first season, it's going to be heavily used. That happens at splash pads, and I think as Nate is hinting at, I'm not gonna say it's going to happen, but eventually people kind of like, you know, the thrill wears off, if you will. And they're gonna kind of go back to the splash pads that, you know, are closer to them. This is probably, you know, it's gonna be more for, obviously the residents of Amherst, but, you know, it will attract people in that first season, obviously.
So it's heavily used now, as Mr. Malloy said. Hopefully it will be more, you know, I think it will fluctuate in how popular it is. But there's obviously an issue right now, right? That's what you neighbors are saying. So I think a little piece of advice, I think this is exactly what the TAC deals with. Speed limits are there's a whole set of legislation, everything that goes with that, but they understand the process. So it's also going there, knowing what you're asking for, and there's lower expense fixes and higher, like, so signage obviously is not as costly as putting sidewalks in, or traffic calming. You know, I think, you know, speed bumps or humps were mentioned, but there's a lot of other newer things that are going on out there, and this is why you bring it to them, and they know, they have various lists going on for different road improvements, and you can talk to them about it. Because that's what I think is what you're really asking. It's more of a big holistic issue than just this park.
And by the way, I'm very sorry about your pet, about your cat.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to say that when you were. So we're back to the, I was just trying to figure out the order. So we're back to the board. Public hearing is still open, of course. So,
Just to go back to the park, I just want to say that I really was happy to hear that the design can still be sort of reworked in the placement of either the placement of the play devices or where the benches and gathering.
I should mention too that, I mean, we haven't finalized the actual play equipment. We have pretty much of an idea of what we want, you know, but some of the individual pieces or, you know, depending on if the town wants to customize any of it or whatever, you know, we've got a lot of room. What's shown on the plan is actually a pretty large piece of equipment in the center there. And it's probably gonna be similar to that with, you know, a lot of the other individual pieces. But, you know, so I'm just saying we're still working through the process and choosing things and choosing benches, for instance. So there's still room and time to make some decisions if, you know, some of the elements need to be altered or, you know, or even deleted if, you know, but, you know, for instance, the slide we went back and forth on that, whether or not we were gonna include it, and, you know, everybody thought the idea for an embankment slide was exciting, but they didn't want a metal slide. We researched the idea of taking a poly slide, and I've seen them on the internet. You see photos where they're buried in the ground, but the manufacturers said, no, we won't bury any of our products like that. So there's other, you know, there's the glass reinforced fiberglass. I forget what it's called, RFGC or something. Where they mold things, like they make fake stones or you know, logs and things like that. It's the same material. They make slides out of that, but for a custom piece, it gets really expensive, and we wanted to have something more than just a straight chute, for instance, you know. So we were using a poly slide that's actually mounted above grade, but it mirrors the ground mirrors the slope of the slide, so it's actually raised up a little bit above the ground, so it's still on, you know, leg supports. So we've had to do some things like that, but to make this happen, but the people that the public comments, you know, that we got from people, they really wanted that slide element, so it's there. We think we've addressed basically all the concerns and comments for the most part. Some of the things were, you know, impossible to do, like put a new swing down below. We're not dealing with the lower level, for instance. So I think we addressed all the comments, but as I said, there's still some things that we can alter that won't affect the project overall or the cost, you know.
Michael.
If we approve this project tonight, which I'm prepared to do, can either Mr. Malloy or Ms. Brestrup enlighten us as to how the final decision about individual specifics, the placement of benches, the individual equipment, who's making those final decisions?
Sure, there's a team of town staff and members of the LSSC Commission that have been meeting, so there's probably about, Public Works, LSSC, Planning, Conservation, and then members of the LSSC Commission that have been meeting with Mike, for a while now, but, so there's like 8 to 10 people, so we're the ones that have been trying to, get through what are the actual equipment selections. So, you could condition this that it return at a public meeting and you can see what we've chosen. So, we've worked with Mike to look at different vendors. There's probably there's a few big companies that represent playground equipment. So we've been going through the catalogs and, so I think we're about 90% there in terms of the equipment. We've narrowed it down, but, that's it'll be staff with LSSC Commission review.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to second guess the people who are making these decisions with some real knowledge, as opposed to me who is just looking at stuff and saying, "Oh, I like that."
Oh, it's overwhelming, to be honest.
I'm sure it is. So that's why I think it would be a mistake to bring this back to the planning board. I think the concept here is what we're trying to discuss, and I like the concept.
I just have a more procedural thing for the concession stand. If that were to become operational, who does that? Is that like the town would
Right, so that would be,
put out
probably
the bid, or LSSC operated, or?
I mean, I don't know, I think it could be LSSC, but it may be, would have to, honestly, I'm not sure how that would work, if it's used for a one-day event, that's different than if it became, an operational thing that's open every day, then maybe that is something that would be put out to bid so that a vendor could use it. But I think just maybe the liability and costs and everything haven't been there to, justify having it be open, on a limited basis, but.
There's no, I'm just trying to think, are there any town-operated concessions? Well, it says popsicles, right?
The football field? They
What's
do
this?
The football field?
Oh, football.
At the high
Yeah,
school, they
but
do
that's-
run one, but I
Yeah.
think it's parent-driven.
But it's not, I don't think it's a town.
Yeah, yeah.
Town run.
Yeah.
The, I mean, the building was built in the late 90s, and I think at the time, there were more programmed, formal sports activities on the upper fields, and so I think they thought, okay, well, we're putting in restrooms, we'll put in a concession. I think it's outfitted with, maybe even the commercial kitchen, but it's never really been used, so. That's a good question, who would do it?
Yeah. So where are we at? And I do have the traffic issue, and so one of the goals of so again, we have to sort of evaluate the size and the scope of the project, versus the other kind of public works that might be associated with that. So there's sort of a degree of reasonableness that we have to consider also. So, and I think that no matter how we deal with the traffic issue, we should or have given already some guidance on how, how to address that. So where are we on the?
Well, I move to close the public hearing and to approve the proposal as submitted.
I'll second that.
More discussion?
Is there any way that we can speak to the traffic as a condition, in terms of the town will go before the TAC?
I don't think it's within the purview of this body to set traffic issues. I mean, the public streets are controlled by the select board, and there is a separate body that deals with traffic issues. And I think recommending to them informally, which we have clearly done, ought to be enough.
So we do things like when the Atkins Market was proposed, we made some recommendations for signs in the public, obviously for crosswalks, but also signs in the public way that actually weren't followed. But we did make recommendations on, like right turn only and things like that. But ultimately, as you said, it's the select board controls the right of way. So we could certainly issue an advisory, I think, or if we haven't done so already.
Or can we send a heads up to the DPW and the TAC that this has come to us and they should expect it to come to them, and you're going to forward the letters.
Certainly do that. I'll be in touch with the staff person for the TAC, which is Guilford Mooring, the Superintendent of Public Works. So I will ask him to put this on the agenda to discuss.
It's good.
Ready to vote? All in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know. The town should get into the concession stand. Oh, the golf course. Cherry Hill has concessions.
Well, I'll say.
This is where we killed the tree.
That's right.
I
There's our
don't
answer.
pass them down.
And that's LSS.
Yeah, expand their mission. Have Cherry Hill do the concessions here.
Yeah.
Did you get a
Oh, the
copy of
one
the
from
other
a year
letter?
ago? Oh, I'm so glad you did.
There is.
Yeah.
Oh, it's, yeah, so
And then it goes down.
we should get a meeting from Groff Park to almost to southeast.
Right, just except for that little.
Yeah.
What did we have?
A lot of,
Yeah.
yeah. So that alone,
That's an awful term, but that's a factor.
Yeah.
I know that they had, but this is the first one I've been. Well, I may want it, you know.
I know. See, that's a part of the problem is that it's really remote. It's very remote, so, because it sort of feels like a little country way. Okay, whenever you guys are set up, we'll start. So we don't have too many people here tonight, but we have a few. We don't have that too many people tonight, but we have a few. Yeah, yeah.
There's no, there won't be an official report, but I can.
Yeah. It was. See, we're, it's good. It's a good meeting.
That's good.
I did draft some conditions if you get to the point where
Okay.
you feel like you want to.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Do you recommend that I mention your recommendation at the beginning? Or? Okay. All right. All set?
All set, thank you.
Okay, so we're on SPR 2018-16, SPP 2018-04, Archipelago Investments LLC, 26 Spring Street. Request site plan review approval for a mixed-use building under section 3.325 of the zoning bylaw with 58 apartments and 1,000 square feet of retail space with associated site improvements, a modification of SPR 2017-10, and request special permit for modification of a height by less than 2 feet in rear setback requirements under footnote A of Table 3 of the zoning bylaw, which again is a modification of SPP 2017-03. So we're going to go through the usual order. And something about in the preamble that I forgot to mention at the beginning, but when we get to the public comment, all of the public is asked to identify themselves, including your name and street address, and all the questions, comments, remarks are to be directed to the board after the speaker is recognized by the chair. So, board member disclosures? So I see none. The applicant's presentation.
I'm trying to reduce the size of it, so I can grab additional. Okay, great, thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the files here.
Oh, yeah.
So most, while you're doing that, and I'm sure you'll mention this, but most of us were on the board last year, is 2017, when you proposed a project for this site that looked in essence like this project. And there's enough differences to what was proposed then and now that this is essentially a new application. Is that the best summary? Yeah.
We can consider it a modification of the original permit because the original permit is still in effect.
Okay.
Both the site plan review and the special permit for the original project are still in effect.
Okay. So this is a modification of a already approved. Okay.
So,
And can I ask a question? So the default is what was approved is still approved.
That's correct.
So our actions can be, what can our actions, so our actions can be not,
Well, I think you should really look at this as if it were a new thing that's being brought to you, but know that it is a modification of
default
what
goes back to-
came before.
okay.
Yeah, it is, I think, different, quite different.
okay.
So, thank you for having us. Kyle Wilson from Archipelago Investments. As you've stated, we currently have approvals for a project on this site that is similar in some ways and different in other ways. So what we're presenting to you tonight is what we presented to the Design Review Board last night. The basic partie of two gable roofs staggered on the site has remained the same. And then I'll start with the design outside and work my way into the inside in terms of what's changed on this building. So up top, you'll notice that we've gotten rid of the dormers. The dormers used to have, there were 3 on either side that showed a mezzanine, a 5th floor in the building. We've gotten rid of that 5th floor, so this is now a 4-story building, and have utilized that roof space as a location for a 100 kilowatt photovoltaic array. We brought in last night to the Design Review Board the SunPower type of PV panel that we'd like to use that's all black, so it doesn't have the aluminum surround on it, which will, we think, integrate more closely with the standing seam metal roof. As we work our way down, we have introduced more glass into the building, and we've pushed that as far as we can from a building code standpoint and efficiency standpoint, so we're at about 45% total glazing to envelope. We've introduced some cedar around the windows on on all of the elevations. And then on the ground floor, we have introduced a steel and metal storefront system and painted panel system that will mimic the coloring of the roof. So these upper 4 floors float. The building has, on the ground floor, has shifted so that, as you'll see here in the site plan, the current approvals have the building about another 8 feet further to the west, closer effectively to Grace Church, further away from the Jones property. So this building has shifted to the east, and what that's done is it's allowed us to increase the outdoor terrace for potential for future outdoor seating affiliated with the retail space. Which you can see here. The grade, there are 3, it's effectively a slab on grade building. There's 3 slab heights. This is 290, which is right at the sidewalk. This is 293 at the retail, and the residential floor level is 296. So this site still has a 10-foot grade change from the back northwest corner to the southeast corner that we still have to try to accommodate.
As you'll see here with the people in the rendering walking up this ramp, this is our egress path. On the currently approved plans, it is on the east side of the building, and we've shifted it to the west side, which brings us out on to the highest point of the sidewalk relative to the street. This is the back of house, which is actually side of house now, which is the trash, recycling, fire, sprinkler, all the utilities that will have to be accessed in the building are now here, which is right behind the retail. You can see that on this elevation, where this is retail, this is kind of back of house, and this is the residential portion. One benefit of being able to shift the building over to the east is an ability to plant and have landscaping on both sides. We're able to plant service berries in between this building and Grace Church. The building inside, I'll stay here for a minute and then I'll go inside. So this is the grade, this is the south elevation at pedestrian level. So this is the lobby entry, which shows a fireplace in the lobby. Again, that's at 290. These are steps up to the retail, again at 293, up to this space. And then this is the outdoor portion patio. We have pushed this portion of the bar back further so we can plant against this patio, and doing so allows us to eliminate the need for a handrail that would have to be at the street side. And then we've tried to take the granite wall that was installed at Grace Church when the town lowered Spring Street, take something similar across the face of this, which is a granite veneer stone that is a landscape wall in this location, and turns into an architectural wall, a veneer on the building on this bar here. This is the site plan from above. This is showing the photovoltaics on both east and west portions of the roof, everywhere we can. This is showing our building coverage, and this is showing our lot coverage. The building itself has, and I'll come back to those. The building itself has changed in that the number of units have gone from 38 to 58, and the unit types have shifted. This is our first floor plan that starts to show some of those units and shows our lobby, package room, stair, elevator, fireplace, the retail, which has grown a bit from the currently approved plans, a fitness center, and this is kind of the back of a house that then takes you out here. So let me try this. So this is the egress out of the second stair, which is now coming around the west side of the building and wraps and comes down to this stair. So the shift in the units has, as you'll see up here, we have a number of one-bedroom units. We have 6 one-bedroom units that face the street, and we have 52 studio units that are of different sizes depending on where they are in the building. On the ground floor, we have gotten rid of the parking that was previously shown below, and in place of that is storage that is for the residential apartments. The patios outside of all these ground floor units are shown here on the sides, and that takes us up to the building and lot coverage calculations, which are shown here and are included in our application. The total building coverage is 63%. In BG, we're allowed 70%, I believe. And the total lot coverage is 76%, where we are allowed 95% lot coverage. The setbacks, which we have discussed with planning staff, the building, the setback on the street is a 0 setback. There is an eave up at the roof that will project over the property line as and a canopy at the entryway, which we'll have to reconcile with the select board. On the back, we have this back corner is a 0 lot line to the face of the building, and what we are going to be doing here is we are not going to have an eave on this back bar of the building. So that will be flush all the way up, so that zero setback is a by right condition in the bylaw. The upper floors you'll see this is the first residential floor. I'm sorry, let me go back here so I can kind of clarify this. This lobby is the 290 condition. This retail is the 293 condition, along with the back of house, side of house here. And then the 296 condition is this entire corridor and these units, including the fitness center. That's all up at 296. So those are the three slabs work together. The third and fourth floors are identical. The second and third floors are identical, and this is the fourth floor, and as I said, we've gotten rid of the fifth floor in this proposal. So on the roof, you'll see the gables here. It's a 12-12 pitch, so it's a 90-degree angle at the top of the gable. That 90-degree angle is also represented on the roof facing the street. I'm sorry, that same 12-12 pitch is represented on the roof facing the street and the roof facing north, and what that does is creates a well for the mechanical system. So the generator, if needed, the fresh air, ERV, HRV, and the condensers that would go with for the split units that would go and heat and cool the building. There is an elevator overrun here, and then there is the hot water is either going to go tucked into this penthouse or is going to be in the basement, all electric hot water. These are the rendered elevations. You'll see this is the south side facing the street. You'll see the materials called out where we've got a brick that we brought a sample of. We've got a cedar. We've got fiberglass windows, a standing metal standing seam roof, the storefront system, and the height is represented as 56'3" to the midpoint of this 12-12 pitch. And that is from the average finished grade at the street at Spring Street. So we've shown that in all locations. So you can see we've been able to integrate plantings on the east side and plantings along the west side, as well as the plantings in between the units on the patios. The west facade shown here, you can see that big grade drop off from the back of the site all the way down to the street. You can see the north facade, which is zero lot line, and then you can see the east facade, again with plantings and the patios. This is all residential. This is the package room, the wall for the package room, and this is the lobby itself. If we look at there's hydrology. Oh, they need that. Let me go to landscape. So here is the landscape plan. The landscape plan shows what we're able to do with by eliminating the dormers. The currently approved plan has integrated downspouts in the wall assembly, and we've brought those out and exposed them, and we're going to actively work to try to integrate the civil and the landscape to try to use these planted areas as on this side a swale, and then for our retention on the west side. So we've got a swale along this east property line that's planted that drops all the way down here where the grade drops again down to the street. It's planted here along the street side and planted here. That same planting is brought over. We've got a paver that would be similar in color and material to the granite landscape wall that has a running bond pattern that brings you up the ramp, and for the area for potential outdoor seating for this retail. It turns into a concrete walkway for the egress path out of that back door, and then the planted shrubs along that west elevation. This is, let me see. This is an outdoor lighting plan that shows the integrated lighting on the retaining wall. That's obviously all down lighting in the wall that would provide the required foot candles for the egress path outside, and would also be in this grade height retaining wall along the ramp. facing west. And I should talk about the streetscape, the proposed streetscape improvements. So what we currently have out on Spring Street, there are 4 power poles. This is, again, in the currently approved plans, it's the same thing we proposed before. There's 4 power poles that are in asphalt curbs that project out into Spring Street, as we saw at the site visit. Those planting poles are as I understand from talking with Eversource, a spur that start at the Churchill intersection on Spring Street and head west along Spring Street. They feed as I understand, the 2 buildings that Amherst College owns across the street, the residential style white buildings there. The Jones property on the corner of Churchill and Spring is actually fed off of Churchill, and Grace Church is fed underground at this point. So what we're showing is public way improvements that would only really be possible if we were able to get the power poles eliminated and the power, cable, and phone all buried. So when the Town of Amherst redid Spring Street and lowered it, it was occurring at about the same time that the Lord Jeff was under renovations prior to the 2008 crash. There are conduits that have been buried. There are concrete structures that have been installed. Obviously, it'd be in every best interest if we could use as many of those as possible. We do not know if, as of yet, if those meet current needs for Eversource or Comcast or Verizon. We haven't gotten into those negotiations with those utilities as of yet, but that would be the hope, obviously. If those power poles can be removed and the utilities buried, then there's an opportunity to look at how to reuse that portion of the public way. And what we've shown, what we've proposed as a starting point to have conversations with the select board and so on, is to look at bringing this curb line out, potentially planting street trees along that on the street side of the existing sidewalk, and then looking at a potential to have a shrub layer that would effectively cover that entire planting well for the street trees. What the tree warden has done with the new street trees in town is to provide a much larger opening for the street trees to allow the root growth to spread a little bit more. And then, as I understand it, looking at some potential shrubs that could support that. What we've proposed is a red twig dogwood that might be resistant enough to handle all the salt and abuse. And then we've shown bike racks that are in front of the lobby, and that would go along with the storage that we're showing in that basement area in the building. Another thing that we spent a bunch of time on this iteration is looking at this corridor. The corridor for floors 2, 3, and 4 is open on both sides, on the south and the north. And one of the things that we're noticing in the buildings that we're constructing now is those corridors can become almost too bright. And in a situation like this where it's open on this end, we wanted to try to see how far we could take that while still meeting building code and egress requirements. So we've looked at a darker interior finish and then a lighting program that's going to allow just above the required foot candles for the egress and the corridors up above, and then lighting at the unit entries for the doors, so that if any of us walk past in the middle of winter and we look up, this is not as bright as the lights that will be coming from residential units and so on. Let's see. Civil, so this is the existing condition. This is showing the bounds of the property here. This is the retaining wall when the new police station went in that was put on the property line. The little shed that the police station has is in this location right here. So on the police property to the north of that retaining wall. This is a, what's the name of that? Priscilla Park. The Priscilla Park House at Grace Church. That is to the west, and this is the Jones property to the east. These are the trees that we have previously discussed in in coordination with the ownership here. This one is ready to come down anytime. And then with this new plan, without the underground parking, we'll work with them to see if they're interested in preserving any of these trees. If we're interested, if they are to be preserved, because there's an opportunity to potentially preserve those, because we don't have to excavate for the foundation as close as we did previously. This is showing this is the proposed site plan. I'll go to the utility plan. That is showing grading and utilities, where we're gonna have to obviously work with DPW as we've done in the past to tie into sewer lines, to grab the water lines, there's a hydrant that needs to be moved from on the property to the right-of-way. I believe all of those are addressed in the letter that the town engineer submitted, and we're showing this proposed public right-of-way improvement that would integrate the storm, potentially integrate stormwater connections. I did bring one of the things that was brought up at the design review board last night was context, and that's what I have on this flash drive. And I have a couple of printouts here that I could give. These are, we've submitted these in the past, previously, but they're just the 3D Google images that show this block and our approach with this building with the gable roofs and how it sits on the site is to try to be in keeping with the larger buildings that are on this block. This building obviously being one of them, Town Hall, the police station, Grace Church. And then I think, how do I grab it? With the Microsoft? Or, if there's a browser, I could just go into, so everybody behind me can see it. Can I get in, is it connected to the internet? Give it a try. Sorry.
Below the left. Yeah, I saw that. Thank you so much. You can also look out the window. No way.
So all right. I don't know if this is.
I think you had it. So you want to change to?
Not working. Okay, sorry. Well, the printouts that I brought hopefully will assist in some of that. What else? So the brick that we've got here, this is the sample of the cedar that we've shown. This is the sample of the brick. On the currently approved project, it's a Danish brick that we've been trying to integrate into buildings. We haven't been able to. This is actually manufactured in the United States, so it's a similar hand-formed brick, similar proportions, longer, thinner, but it is we're able to course it in feet and inches, which works with what we're trying to do. And then this is the cedar that is for the surround, as shown on the elevations around the windows, and we'll go with the black fiberglass windows. So I think with that, I'm sure I've left something out, but I want to open it up to questions.
Yeah, so we'll go, before we take questions, we'll go on to the site visit report. So our team of Michael, Christine, and Jack joined Chris Brestrup and then the two of you on the site visit yesterday morning. And do one of you that were on the site visit want to give the report, I guess really focusing on the questions?
So everything was, we heard the same information that we just heard. And some of the questions that, or actually the list of questions was summarizing. One, will the utility poles be removed in order to provide space for the proposed landscaping in front of the building? The developer plans to work with the Town of Amherst and with Wemco Eversource to remove the utility poles and put utilities underground. It is not clear where the money will come from for this endeavor. 2, will the parking in front of the building be removed? The developer is proposing to remove about 3 to 4 parking spaces in order to provide an island of streetscaping in front of the building in the town right-of-way. 3, will the lamp post along Spring Street be relocated? The lamp post along Spring Street will need to be relocated. Number 4, how will the grades in the building work? There will be 3 levels on the first floor, the lobby at 290, the retail at 293, and the residential portion at 296. And those were the questions.
Okay, so questions, comments generally from the board? Yeah.
I just have one. So in the original design, it said 38 units, and
Correct.
now it says 58. And currently, as you said, 6 one-bedroom and
52
52
studio.
studios. So previously on the 38, so currently, that's 58 bedrooms. So do we have the number for the previous? It was 38, but it was mixed. You had like few studios and 1 bedroom, and I did come up with a number myself when I counted, but I was wondering if you had one.
Well, that's actually part of the management plan and the application. I believe that on the previous, on this where it's listed as 60 tenants, because we're asked to list how many tenants would be in those 58, so assuming that some of those 1-bedrooms have more than 1 person.
Right.
And then the previous was, I believe, 45, and I have to pull that up. I don't recall if that's exactly right, but because there were more larger units, there was a assumption that there'd be, at various times, obviously it fluctuates year to year, but that there'd be more units with more than 1 person in it.
Right. Could I just do a follow-up? So when I went through the old drawings, I came up with 48 bedrooms, just to try to get a comparison. It
Okay.
looked like 48 bedrooms, and now there's 58.
58.
So just, and again, right, there might be 2 people in a 1-bedroom or whatever, so right, but just to get that. So then, in that process, I noticed that in the old plans, you had the square footage of the units. And in the new stuff we have, I don't see them there. So I was wondering if you have a range of what the size of the studios are, because they
Again,
do range a
I
lot.
believe that is, if I can, that's in the application as well. I had broken that out.
I don't usually give the board that portion of the application. I don't think, oh yeah, I give them the management plan. So if it's in the management plan,
The
then
management plan.
you should have copies of the management.
Yeah, we do have the,
Square footage of the units is not in the management.
Not in the management. So I did measure what I thought was the smallest unit, and it was 12 by 28, which is about 336 square feet. So that's the smallest one.
smallest.
And they're furnished or some are furnished?
These would be furnished.
Every unit.
That's the assumption for the studios, yes. And the reason that we've shifted the plan is because of the demand we've gotten at 1 East Pleasant. We've seen that the demand for the smaller units is there, and that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're trying to deliver. And the shift there became a situation where trying to integrate, bring that unit that we think is what the market is after, was really difficult to reconcile with the parking. And then the parking was driving everything, where that drive aisle to bring people down was pushing the building closer to Grace Church, was eliminating the ability to have the plaza, the patio outside. And I think that's what we're just seeing more and more of, as especially the people that are signing leases right now. You know, the people that are, you know, just, you know, getting a graduate position at UMass over Tufts or somewhere else. They're coming in late in the summer, and this is the unit that they're looking for.
So the demand is really that strong for studios, even
Yes.
more than one bedroom? Like,
Correct.
they'll go for 350 square feet.
Correct.
Would you expect many of those to be, like, do you expect those in general to be one person?
Yes.
Or is that what you're finding?
That's what we're seeing. And I think that, you know, we've had this conversation before the board, I mean, when we talked about One East Pleasant, in that UMass is now up to 8,000 grad students. And those folks are interested in a different approach. And that goes from folks who are grad students to PhD to postdocs to researchers. The new IELTS building is bringing folks in, polymer science, data science. It's a new demographic. It's the missing 25 to 35 demographic that we're trying to bring downtown.
So, and I know we have sample leases, but the minimum length of a lease is what?
What do you mean? What's the minimum length?
Yeah, is it a year?
I mean, that's optimal for us.
Yeah.
Obviously. 5 years would be optimal, obviously. Fewer turns, less management. The year is kind of the default.
I guess I'm trying to get the lower end.
Sure.
Like a month?
Well, I've talked with Amherst College. I received their letter, talked to them about their concerns, which was about Airbnb. And is this being established to be an Airbnb? And we've said it's not. These are the one-year leases that we're signing up the street. And I said that the assumption in that is that these units are maybe more suitable to Airbnb than other units. And I don't know that that's the case. Because if you wanted a hotel, there's a hotel right across the street. So we haven't thought about a lower end on the lease.
So maybe just along that same line, that at some point, and I'm not saying that this is what you're proposing at all, but at some point, particularly the fully furnished part, and this is from the letter, that at what point does it become a hotel? In other words, if it were all Airbnbs, then it may be better positioned in the zoning bylaw, in a different category. So I don't know the answer to that. Do the individual, so your management company or whomever is going to be the primary rental agent?
Correct.
But will there be a clause that renters can't sublease for limited periods of time?
That's what we currently have. You can't sublease at all.
Sublease at all?
It's effectively a relet. So if someone is going to want to get out of a lease before it's expired, they have to find someone to take it over, and then it's a relet. So they have to come in, they have to apply, they have to qualify, and then it's a relet.
So if one of your tenants decided to do a side business of Airbnb, then that would be?
I mean, that's a question for anybody that has a rental property in Amherst, really. I think that's and that's evolving pretty quickly. 5 years ago we wouldn't necessarily be talking about it, and I don't know what the situation will be in the next 5.
But how would you address that today?
How do we address what? If
you had tenants who had signed the year or whatever lease, but it came to your attention that they had the opportunity or were intending to, or realizing that they were now putting it out there as an Airbnb or something like that, how would you address that?
It's a good question. I think it's probably covered in our lease somewhere underneath the reletting, in that I don't know if it's allowed. I think that if we had, that being said, I think if we had a tenant who, I don't know if, I actually don't know how that's handled. If I have a tenant who wants to, go away for 3 weeks and have, someone stay in their unit, I think we have a clause that has a couple of days, it might be in the sample lease, where, there's no guests for longer than X amount of time in that, in that unit.
Yeah, I mean, something to, I guess it's a concern. It's a real concern, and in part because it is a zoning issue, and in fact, bed and breakfasts are, sort of dealt with in the zoning bylaw, and it's normally thinking of like a single-family house. And and you almost have your hand up, but so, yeah.
So the town doesn't really have any regulations regarding Airbnbs, but when I spoke with the building commissioner about this, he was more concerned about vacant units potentially being considered Airbnbs than he would be a unit that's actually rented by a tenant who is the principal tenant of that space. And then if that tenant chooses to, let it out for a couple of days here and there, he wouldn't really see that as a problem. But it's really the vacant spaces that would become more like hotel rooms than apartments if they were let out on a regular basis.
So has that been asked to them?
What?
Has that been asked? Like, do you have any plans to rent out for short-term units that you don't currently have rented?
I mean, again, like I said, our best case scenario is not to ever have to do that, is to be in a situation where we do one-year leases. That being said, there's a Kendrick Place unit that is currently on Airbnb right now. And that Kendrick Place unit was someone who moved to, who left, abandoned the lease and got out. And it was put onto Airbnb to see what to determine, to see what it was. It's a one-bedroom unit.
Was it put on the Airbnb by your management company?
No, it was
or
put
by
on
the
by
original lessee?
a tenant.
So we're gonna go back to raising your hand and. yeah,
So
go,
that's
Christine.
why I think what we're trying to clarify here, there's the, of course, the people who have a lease and they think they're going away or whatever.
do an Airbnb.
want to rent it. I mean, we used to call this subleasing, whether it was for a week or a month or a summer. Airbnb to me is more like a day or two, but I guess what we're asking is, if you had empty units that weren't rented, would you put them on as like Airbnbs for short, like day or week rentals?
Well, I think that is that's a big question, right? I mean, if you type in, because I did this before the meeting today, if you type in on Airbnb, Amherst, Massachusetts, there's 300 hits that come up, right? And so, some of which are in single-family homes, some of which are in apartment buildings, some of which are in assorted areas all over town. And that's something that Boston has just, had a lengthy process that they've just come up with a way of saying, it's okay if it's this long, it's not okay if it's that long, it's okay if it's single ownership, it's not okay if it's, an entire building, and that's for the entire, municipality of Boston.
So, so I guess really the big question is, at what point do we move into the hotel part of the zoning bylaw? And you're absolutely right that this is sort of new territory. On the other hand, hotels that have operated as, basically they sell each unit as a condo. So basically the hotel each room is individually owned by somebody, but it operates, you go to the same, it looks like a hotel, it walks like a hotel, but it's actually condos that are individually owned. Has been around for a while. So that would be a concern for me. That was actually sort of flagged by the Amherst College letter, yeah.
I just wanted to point out in the draft conditions that were prepared by staff number 33 is that there shall be no short-term rental, 30 days or less, of vacant apartment units, so that that issue was addressed in the draft conditions.
Okay. And I should also say that, so we're using Airbnb as the,
Sure.
the 1 week to 1 day, but Airbnb is actually a good resource for long-term rentals also, so they've expanded their mission, so you can get, if you're going to, to a distant place, you can get the deals on long-term, I don't know, up to a year, but for several months, it's actually a good resource for that.
Well,
I think in reality, though, with the growth of UMass,
Mr. Wood, would you
I'm
use the
sorry,
microphone?
yeah, thank you so much. You have to come up and identify yourself even.
what we've seen with the growth in the graduate programs in many departments at UMass right now is that we don't have a single problem leasing these studio units to grad students and above. So in reality, I don't think, we're worried about that. As Kyle has said, longer-term leases is what drives our bottom line, and that's where we want to be. So we're incented to go toward long-term leases and not short-term. We don't want to get into the management of day-to-day issues that come up with an Airbnb-type operation. And as I say, we're sold out of one-bedroom units, and they're mostly to grad
Studios.
students and above.
And I think
Or studios,
and
that's right.
and I think that in regards to the draft conditions, we had to hustle to kind of come up with a response to this when we got the letter and talked with Amherst College about it. And our thinking is that this is an issue that needs to be handled at the town level, not at an individual project level. That if there's an issue of the house next door that has some smaller units, the houses further down the street, houses on Main Street, houses, 4 or 5, 8 units elsewhere, that I have no idea if they're Airbnb.
So those are all not to interrupt, but those are all now at the enforcement level because they're all in existence, so here we have one that's not in it.
But the concerns, as I understand it, the concerns about an Airbnb is that it's, which you've seen in other big cities, and that's the reason Boston addressed the issue, was that you'd have more traffic coming in and out. You'd have more people. You'd have people with suitcases showing up when people thought, hey, I rented an apartment here. Why do I have, people with suitcases coming up and down the hallway every day? And I think that concern is yes, it's enforcement, but the concerns are the same. The concerns are the same if any rental property in Amherst turns into, they say, hey, which I don't think we're seeing, but we're seeing 1s and 2s here and there. If there's a vacancy, if someone has broken a lease and you have someone taking a lease in 3 months or something like that, or in a month. And so I think that the issue of the Airbnb, it's interesting that it's been brought up here, but I think that's an issue that really should be resolved at the municipal level rather than a project-by-project basis.
So calling it Airbnb and calling it the concern of Lord, Jeff, or any hotel, they're worried that people are coming and staying 1, 2, 3, 4 nights and renting a hotel, and instead they would rent an apartment through an Airbnb.
Right.
But you have to have cleaning services and
Yeah.
all that. It's a whole different
Yep.
business. But it would be more, what we're talking about maybe is weeks or months.
Yeah.
So just reading, so what I noticed what Greg had mentioned before in the previous the agreement, how it said, no short-term, less than 30 days, right? Yeah, right, on the one East Pleasant, it said less than 30 days that you wouldn't want to have lease, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. And then in the current lease that we got from you for Spring Street, number 16, there's no page numbers, but it's item number 16, it says assignment/subleasing. The tenant shall not assign or sublet the whole or any part of the leased premises. So to me, that says that whoever has signed the lease, they can't sublet or assign, but again, we don't have regulations that clearly put Airbnb in a sublet category or whatever.
Right.
But that eliminates them even being able to sublet, which to me seems very extreme. But I was like relieved in a way to see that. And you're saying that your desire is not to, when we talk short term, I think a month, 2, 3 months, where I think the hotel's issues are 1, 2, 3 nights.
3 days, yep, understood.
Except then you all have extended stay hotels, you have, I mean, in other words, it's,
Which is what they're building in Hadley right now.
yeah, right. Another category for the zoning subcommittee to look at. Oh, my.
So, I
Yeah.
just want to, so a question is
Yeah.
that truly, I mean, I assume this is a draft.
Yeah.
But, shall not assign or sublet the whole or any part of the lease, is that what you're
And
gonna
that's,
go with for this?
yeah, and that's in our lease, so
Number 16.
it's really an enforcement issue.
There I go, no one knows who I am now.
Drop the
No, it's
mic.
probably better that way, no. Thanks, Dave. Thank you.
So, and I think that in reading up quickly on the approach that the city of Boston took when they were trying to juggle with this, it was some of the same issues, where the hotels were upset that if folks were doing onesie twosies, and then people in condos were upset because they bought a condo and their hallway was full of people with suitcases and so on. And so they, through a long process, came up with a resolution that they applied at the, for the entirety of the city of Boston.
So go ahead.
Well, if you determine that it's in the best interests of your tenants not to put up with suitcases every 3 days,
Yeah.
it's perfectly possible for you as a landlord to say there can be no transient business here. To prevent your tenants from engaging in that kind of business, isn't that right? I mean, you could do that on your own. I realize that it's maybe a townwide situation, but for your own protection of your own tenants, you could do that.
We could.
You do? Okay. And that works at Kendrick Place?
Well, we could. I think it requires I think if you ask anybody who has a rental property, I mean, you could post your house right now for Airbnb tonight, and then I'd have to go onto Airbnb tonight to find it. And if you pulled it off tomorrow, I wouldn't know that it was ever on there. So the enforcement is really difficult, right? It's a difficult thing if the goal is to manage every single unit, then you have to kind of build a software that trawls Airbnb and, sends you a signal anytime any of the properties that have your address are.
But we do in the town have a rental permit
Yeah.
requirement, so Airbnb, I would assume, does not. She's saying no. Why?
Just the normal rentals that are by lease are considered rentals, and they have to register, but Airbnbs do not have to register, and nor do hotels or inns or anything of that nature.
But an Airbnb click is a lease. I mean, that's basically a lease.
That is the case, but the town hasn't grappled with
Okay.
questions with regard to Airbnb yet.
Reported one.
And that could be the result, right? If there was and that's somewhat what Boston has done, is that if you are going to do it more often than X number of times, then you do have to register your unit as an Airbnb type of unit. But that's been a lengthy process where they've grappled with these issues on at the scale of the whole city.
But not to argue break out into a whole discussion about Airbnb, but if you, for example, have an owner-occupied duplex, and you have a lease on one part, and you Airbnb the top part, then it's no longer owner-occupied.
Well, and you can Airbnb your couch.
That's
Really, there's Airbnb
that's
when I was on.
That's couch surfing.
Yeah, that's another website. But you can go on right now. When I was looking today, it's just rooms. It's like you're there, you're sleeping over
In fact,
here.
I have to keep this meeting going till 10 so that the guy gets off my... So I can get my couch back, yeah. Dave?
I do think that this is a concern, and that the design of the building with the studios, the fully
Yeah.
furnished, it's a concern. I take your point that it's a townwide concern, not merely a single development, but this is our concern with this development as well, and so it seems valid. But I have a different set of questions.
Sure.
Too. And I think these are very helpful. That you handed out. Thank you.
And that's an approximation of the site. The yellow, I just did the best I could with Photoshop.
I'm not holding you.
Yeah. Okay.
But But part of my question about the site and the request for the extended height is, it's not, I'm curious about the height of the adjacent buildings as well, because it's not clear to me whether this, as projected, is overwhelming, or is, especially since the street is on a grade, you know, how that, and how the height of it looks in, from all angles, from the other side, from the Lord Jeff side,
Yep.
whether it will dwarf the steeple of the church, how it will look, you know, will it overwhelm the police station and the, is that, I'm not quite sure if that, is that the Masonic Lodge or the?
Yep, Masonic Lodge, yeah.
Side, you know, and that's what it would look like. I mean, you have streetscape views, but I don't think there's a perspective that I saw in looking through this that gave that impression. And so I'm curious whether you have available the adjacent buildings' heights relative to the proposed site here.
Yeah, we have, we haven't built that into a model or anything to show it. I think what we've done with this building is we've removed the 5th story, and it's now a 4-story building. We wanted to build the gable roof so that it has a pitch that's similar to the surrounding buildings. And then the 56-foot 3 versus the 55-foot is to the midpoint of that gable. And that's based on trying to dial in what we think are the correct proportions for, you know, the units inside and the facade outside.
But the triangle, inside the triangle, the attic space is just air, right? There's no-
It'll be a truss.
Yep.
And then it'll be the chaseway for the fresh air that drops into every unit. It'll be insulated, it'll be unoccupied, and it'll be, the ductwork for the fresh air gets run up there and dropped into each individual unit.
So the solar panels I was trying to figure out, so you have solar panels on the west facing.
East and west.
East
So
and west.
Each
and
of
then-
these.
And also in the middle there, right? So
Also in as much middle as we could, which is,
Yeah.
you can see here, this is actually carved out of this truss. So the trusses right here
Yeah.
are different trusses because they drop right down to accommodate the mechanical equipment.
So east and west is not optimal for solar.
So we worked with PV Squared.
Yep.
And they actually modeled it based on heights and have come to find with the new sun power units, they're up to like 22% efficient now. And actually, the east-west, you don't lose that much.
Okay.
Obviously, the perfect angle due south is optimal, but this is still worth the investment.
What was the height for the old design? And
Same.
It is the same, so,
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was 56.5 or 50.
but within inches?
Yeah.
So I have the old drawings
Yeah.
and stuff you brought back in
Oh, yeah.
March, and you did do modeling
We did from
showing
Main Street.
mostly from Main Street, and I am more than willing to pass this around to
Sure.
people. There's 3 of them, looking like over the black sheep, looking between
There's one that
the-
shoots through by the
What's-
Masonic Lodge.
Is that the Masonic?
Lodge,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. Masonic Lodge and the police station, and one looking west on Main. So there's 3 of them, and do you want to see it first, or, and then, so send it around. So anyways, just, so I don't know if you did any from the front.
So the building, shifted a little to the east, so it would probably be a little different, but that does give you a sense of that. And actually, as you mentioned it, I think on the previous, with the current plans, I don't know if we tried to Photoshop it into the existing streetscape. I don't know if we might have only done the Main Street ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, Christine?
I just wanted to note that Grace Church is a lot higher up on the street than this building is, And Grace Church is also a fairly tall building, so I bet if you did a cross-section or a profile, just in a line drawing of this building and Grace Church sitting up on its knoll and its height, it would be quite,
Yeah.
there would be
January. I'll
Yeah.
send this around too.
very,
And by the way, we are going to do public comment, and I know someone from Grace Church is here that may want to speak to this issue also. So,
Maybe we should move to the public now.
well, I wanted to do design review board, and I wanted to just, yep.
I have an issue.
Why don't we let's do the design review board summary. So this project went before the design review board last night.
Yes.
And do we have a written report or no?
we do not have a
We do
written
not.
report yet. And they are planning to make recommendations
Yep.
at a future meeting, but they haven't done so yet.
Would it be okay if,
Well, I hate to be very specific about summarizing the meeting, because it was
Yeah.
quite a complicated meeting, and there was a lot of public comment. And there were a lot of points of view expressed from, a lot of questions about the project as it's developing. And the board itself is, I would say, ambivalent about supporting the proposal as it currently exists. So I wouldn't want to go beyond that, suggesting that there's going to be a finding one way or the other, a recommendation one way or the other yet. So I think we're going to have to wait on that.
and then Christie?
Okay, so the issue I have is, so if you had around 48 bedrooms, and I have about 58, and of course, I'm very sad that the parking went away. There were 17 spots, and there's talk about putting utilities underground, which I can, if we look at your renderings, there's no ugly telephone poles and wires in front of the building, and part of it is already hopefully done that can be reused. So I would hope those utilities go down. And right now, in that site, there are 3 or 4 parking spots that were going to be lost with your previous design. And it was only 3 or 4 because of the bump outs around the ugliness of the telephone poles that are existing. So if the utilities were gonna go under, as much as I love the beauty of having the bump out with the trees and more green, I feel that we need to think twice about the bump out into the public way, because at least 6 or 7, I went out there tonight and stepped it out, there could be 6 or 7 parking spots in that area.
If the poles are removed and
If the poles
yep.
are removed and you don't take that extra area that goes into the public, into the roadway,
Yep.
you'd still have a sidewalk, and you could still have a verge, a grass strip, and you could even maybe put trees, I don't think as large as, it would be tight,
Yep.
maybe you'd have to. I am glad that you pushed part of the front back, so you do have more of a green area, and I know you have where you want the retaining wall and the green space. Maybe a couple smaller trees could be planted there or something, so you could still get that lovely, buffer to the building. But I have to say, as chair of the Downtown Parking Committee, I have to say that with the loss of the 17 spots in the parking garage, that I think we really need to think twice about letting that parking go on Spring Street and reworking it so that there potentially could be 7 spots there, because every spot counts. And I'm so glad it's mixed use and you have retail. I would think the retail, I hear, it might be a restaurant or something, I think they're gonna want parking there too.
Well, I think that is the trade-off between, the trees and the parking is a trade-off that is obviously not ours to make. It's a proposal that we're doing, because we'd like to try to bury the power lines, work with everybody to get that done through a grant, or, come up with a funding solution that would allow that to happen. But obviously, we don't, if parking was the decision that's made by the select board and the planning board, then, that could, that wouldn't be our decision, obviously.
And if I could make a comment, so the gable roofs, so it kind of surprises me that we went from 4 or 5 stories to 4 stories, but no change in height. So, because I know that the height is always an issue with, the downtown buildings as it becomes more filled in. So 4 stories I don't know how many stories Lord Jeff right across the street is. 3 stories,
3,
okay.
yeah.
But, and I don't know if this came up at the design review board or not, but have you at least rendered what it would look like with a flat roof? Because you would
We
have a
have not.
substantial lowering of the height.
I mean-
You would still have a place for your solar panels.
Very early on, probably 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, we looked at a flat roof very briefly, and then thought that the gable roof was a clear choice.
Interesting. Because in a weird way, it's conflicting with in a weird way, it's conflicting with Grace Church and the Lord Jeff, because it's sort of creating a busyness. So in other words, if it were a flat roof, maybe it would be more of a foil, where Grace Church could be more celebrated, and then also the Lord Jeff could be more celebrated as, particularly special buildings, and that this would be, sort of a good urban fabric building.
Obviously, if it was a flat roof, then the height would be 48 feet or something.
48 feet.
But
you
it
could
would
have parapets and have solar panels.
the building would effectively still,
Well,
that's without changing anything. That's just looking at this. If you just lop this off, it's
Yeah.
48 feet. But
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we'd be interested in looking at
Okay.
that. I think we've spent a lot of time to try to get to
Okay.
this point.
Yeah, yeah.
With regard to the streetscape, we were talking about this in the planning department today, and thinking that when you approve these drawings and approve this building, if you do so, you're approving this in this image that you have here that's shown, and it's very appealing to have the 4 trees in front of the building, but should you be also considering the possibility that that won't occur, that the poles won't come down, that the trees won't be planted there, or that there will be parking in front of the building instead of trees? So would you like to have an image of what this building would look like without those trees and with this road being a roadway? And that would be, potentially what you would
That's really
actually approve, and then later on, if it came to pass that this streetscaping could occur, all well and good.
I think that's an excellent point, because in a way, what we're doing is we're approving the worst possible case. In other words, what's the minimum that we're willing to?
Yeah, and show the power lines.
Yeah.
Show the power lines, but trees can still be planted. All I'm saying, if you look at the landscape, can you put up the landscape
Yep.
plan? What, you can see where this,
Oops, sorry.
yeah, that's all right. Anyway, yeah, so you see where the sidewalk is, which is public way, but then they're asking for more public way to make a big bump out to plant green, but you lose 6 or 7 parking spots. So if you got rid of the extra bump out, you still could maybe configure or use just a little of it and get a couple trees, but I'm also proposing that they have a new design where they put a tree in the green space on their terrace.
Yeah.
So
Here?
I think there's a couple of different options that can be done.
Yeah,
But I definitely think all of us would like to see the wires come down, obviously.
yeah, of course.
But I think the trees are still open to other options.
Well, and just to be clear, the current condition has a driveway. So there's no, this is the light pole, this is the other light pole. So this is the property line, this is the property line. What we're talking about is there are 1, 2, 3 parking spaces that we're talking about removing. If the poles came down, then there's a chance to be more efficient in the parking, because some of these spaces are really long, all the way from this curb, because I don't think you'd reduce, there's grass by Grace Church. I don't think, that's another way to pick up parking. I don't think that's being proposed.
Getting there.
But if you wanted to get as much parking as you could, you would eliminate everything from the sidewalk into the street, all the way from Boltwood all the way down to Churchill. And you could probably pick up a number of spaces. If you were leaving the curbing that's here and just took it from here all the way down to Churchill, I agree, there's efficiency to be had in this run, where you could probably get 3, and over here, where you could probably take that 6 to make it 8.
So I did step out, that bump out, now that you've mentioned it, next to Grace. But I wanted to ask you first, how far up does the spur go?
The last pole,
Yeah.
is,
And the last pole is where it ends.
the last pole is the pole that I understand drops down and feeds Grace Church. And then there's the concrete encasement that's underground at where the farmer's market is, that there's always a trash can sitting on top of it. The intent there, which is on the southwest corner of the intersection of Boltwood and Spring, down here, the intent is that's where that loop, that Eversource loop occurs.
And another 6 could, so there is another green bump out there that could
Yeah.
be another 6 or 7, and, right. Then there's some smaller bump outs, but they don't, and they could stay, and they're great for traffic calming, but.
Yeah. And there's probably an opportunity down here by the Congregational Church.
So if we talk about the lines going underground, I think all this needs to be thought about, how much of the public way is gonna be given up for green space and how much can be reclaimed for parking, and is there a happy balance in between, which I think can be done, but I would also want it to be examined all the way up next to Grace Church, just like you're saying.
Sure.
So why don't we open up to the public for comment? Seeing none, I'm just, and you'll give us your name, your address.
Been sitting here getting an ulcer.
Oh.
My name is Ken Salmons,
Can you spell that?
and I live at
Did you spell it?
Samonds. Town meeting member for 15 years.
Wow.
I only spoke once, so you can imagine how I feel now. 86 Dana Street. My wife and I are 42-year members of Grace Church, and for the last several years, I've been historian of Grace Church as we celebrated our 150th anniversary. Now, I'm speaking here not as an official representative of Grace Church. They don't even know I'm here. But I have a concern that I wanted to at least have recorded somewhere. I should have brought this up a long time ago. I'm concerned about the shadow of this new building on the east window of Grace Church for early morning services. A little history here. While I was examining the account books of the 1865 building fund at Grace Church, still exists.
Yeah, thank you.
I noticed that a lot of money was paid out to one person over a period of six expenditures. And I had no idea who that was. And I did what we all do. I Googled his name. His name was William Gibson of New York City, and William Gibson was the maker of the stained glass windows for Grace Church. But not only that, he was the first stained glass window maker in America. Very little of his work remains. Very little of his work is identified. Grace Church's windows, we have about 15 of his windows, but the one I'm concerned about is the east window, the biggest window. We have the only documented examples of his work with documentation that he actually made the windows. The east window is an important, large example of early Gothic revival architecture in America. And he was one of the founders of the Gothic revival movement, and so was the architect of Grace Church. Now, I spoke with David a few days ago, who assured me that there was no problem, that the building would never cast a shadow on the window. And I don't question David's word. David and Marion have been devoted members of Grace Church longer than I have. But after our phone call, I still was uncomfortable about this because I'm a scientist by training, and I want to see a diagram or a drawing or some calculations to show me that would be the case, that there won't be a shadow on the window at any time where there might be a service at Grace Church. So I asked him if anybody had actually performed the geometric calculations to assure this, and David, I really didn't get an answer. It's a 4-story building, but with a 5th-story roof on it. It's a tall building. That peaked roof, it's twice the height of the Priscilla Park house, which is the adjacent stucco building. And beyond that is the chancel of Grace Church with this stained glass window. Was it David's estimation by eye of, on a sunny day, sunny summer day, just standing on Spring Street looking to see, what's the line from the roof and that? I don't know. Can we be assured that there will be no shadow at 7:30 in the morning on a day near the winter solstice? I'm not even sure the sun is up by 7:30 in the winter solstice, come to think of it, but I'm not sure. But somebody will know that, be able to know that. So can you show me a scale drawing, an elevation drawing, a diagram that demonstrates that early in the morning, the shadow will not hit the window? The sun's really low at the time of the winter solstice. So I'm not sure that this question has been sufficiently addressed. If the building is built and there's a shadow, what can we do about it? Now, that's where I had intended to stop, but just...
So if I may, like David, I'm also an architect, and then Kyle, and so architects really pay attention to how the sun moves. I'm also a member of, full disclosure, also a member of Grace Church, so usually there in the early morning, but so here's the thing, is that the building is due east of Grace Church, and it's 55 feet tall at the peak. There's a tree on the...
Excuse me, one peak is higher than the other, isn't it?
Whatever, how...
56.3.
Higher than 55. 65.
At the mid.
Forget the part about I'm an architect, yeah. So it's, any case, it's easily modeled. And so, but the sun's coming from the due east, which is really where the problem is, the due east sun, when the sun is horizontal. So it's coming from the due east horizontal twice a year, March 21st and right around Easter, actually, and then September 21st. So you guys should, it's a very real concern. Hopefully you'll model that. But the summer, you're talking about the winter, the leaves are off the trees. The trees in the area are probably the same height, or approaching the same height.
There actually are no shadows on the window at the time.
So that's encouraging, but in the winter, the sun is rising north of east and setting north of west.
Just the opposite.
Opposite. Damn. I'm speaking without my notes. So it's it's rising. So it would, by the time the sun comes up on December 21st, the building's no longer in play. So it would be in play in the summer when it's rising to the north of east. But then by the time 8 o'clock comes around, then it's
so shallow, it rises so shallow.
My instinct is the same as the applicants, that it won't come into play. But I think that having it, I think modeling it is a good idea.
Also, Gary and Dee Dee raised the same issue about 6 months ago.
Okay.
We talked to them and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, that was where I had intended to stop, but can I just say a little more? Why don't we just call this a dormitory? It's a dormitory with no parking. I live about 5.5 blocks from Southwest Dormitory, And on a warm spring evening, we can hear from our screen porch a low roar or maybe even loud rock music coming from Southwest. Now granted, this building isn't as big as Southwest, but these people are going to be playing music and they're going to have their windows open, probably. And Grace Church is a concert site. Grace Church holds Vespers. Grace Church has silent vigils. I'm not sure I want my ashes to be deposited next to a dormitory. This just doesn't sound like a good idea to me. I feel much worse after sitting through this presentation than I did when I came here worrying about a shadow.
Okay. And we can do responses after the public comment, but any other public? Yeah. So we'll do Erica. Erica, then Eric.
Erica Ryugiz, 33 Cosby Avenue. I'm just back in town after being absent a few years, so it's been a lot of changes, a lot of surprising changes. So I apologize, I missed I don't know what the first building looked like. But I actually spoke to the DPW this morning because I wanted to confirm the right-of-way width, which is 49 feet, 6 inches. Sorry, I'll adjust to you. 49 feet, 6 inches. And my other question was, has Amherst adopted a complete streets agenda yet? Apparently it's in discussion. Now, one of the things about complete streets, smart growth, livable community, livable, walkable neighborhoods is the cross-section through the street, perpendicular, showing the profile of the buildings and the right-of-way width. And the ideal proportions, actually USGBC lead for neighborhood design, the ideal proportion is for every foot of building height, you should have 3 feet of building width, of street width, excuse me. 1 foot of building height should be equal to 3 feet of street width. And it varies, that's their ideal.
And
for livable streets,
what was that? What was the principle you just mentioned?
when you look at the cross-section of a street, the right-of-way width to the proportion of the building height. Because complete streets, it's about street facades, it's about the proportions of building heights to street widths. All European cities, all their zoning has that profile, which
That's different than complete streets, isn't it?
No, it's part of it. The cross-section is part of it.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Okay.
The cross-section is part of it. You can, I had all these notes printed, documentation printed out. I can email it to all of you if you'd like. So for Smart Growth America and even in Boston, guidelines for different sized streets, they recommend for every foot of building height, 2 feet of street width. So in other words, if you have a 50-foot wide right-of-way and the building is at a zero lot line, it shouldn't be higher than 25 feet. Now, Amherst has gotten ahead of itself in its desire for density and growth, which is great. We have this kind of uniform 5-story, 55 feet height limit for the business, general business, which is good in some areas, you know, on the bigger streets. But Spring Street is a little side service street that just doesn't have that scale. So one of my questions to you was how high was the eave? And you said it earlier, 48 feet, is that correct?
Yes.
At the eave, it's
Sorry,
40.
Erica, you have to direct questions to me.
Yeah, sorry, okay.
Yeah.
The height, I just wanted confirmation of the height of the eave, and it was 48 feet. I thought the 56 and 3 inches height request was at the ridge, but apparently the ridge, how high is the ridge?
Just what you said, isn't it?
No, that 48 feet is the eave. What's the ridge? What's at the top?
60,
60-something.
60-something,
The
68.
midpoint is 56 feet 3 inches.
Yeah, something like
Where
68.
where it, half of that projection is at zero lot line, so it's right on the street. In other words, proportionally, it's huge. So my question was, is it possible to set that back, go to a flat roof, or do something just to reduce that scale so it's more in scale with this tiny little street that has only this 50-foot right-of-way? That was my question, considering that. So now I know, I didn't realize this was already approved, that there was another version approved. Again, I've been out of town for a few years, so I didn't know that. And I guess the other approved building, this is already a fait accompli, so anyway, we're stuck with this. But for future, it would be nice to do now a fine-grained view, and I know we don't want to do parcel-based zoning, but to consider, you know, this broad-based zoning that we did for this density, that is it really appropriate for these tinier streets? And do we want to kind of tap that down and look at those cross-sections? And when we have a submission, please request of your submitters that they show the profile of the street, that they do the elevations, and that they do the cross-sections. This is good urban design principles. As we're densifying Amherst, we should be requiring this. Every other town does this, every other city does this. We should be doing this too. Because it's very hard to see what's going on here the way this is presented. And no offense, you know, you did beautiful drawings, it's very seductive, it's a beautiful building, but it's missing very important picture information. And this is gonna, you know, it's forward from the street, right to the zero lot line. All the other buildings are set back, with the exception of Grace Church, which is a little closer. I mean, this is really gonna stick out in a way that is going to really destroy the feel of that street. And I just hope you all take that into consideration, that's all. Because once it's there, we'll never get rid of it. I remember the 90s, sitting on master planning stuff here in the early 90s on when we had a master planning process in Amherst, and everybody complained about the bank building at the corner and how we could never get rid of it. Well, it's still there. And, you know, things don't go away once they're built. So I don't want to see any regrets. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome back. Eric?
I'm Eric Brody, and I'm Chair of the Public Art Commission. And I want to talk a little bit also about something else that's missing from this project. Last night's Design Review Board meeting, I made a pitch for public art at private development projects, but in a way it felt like I was just talking into the wind. So I want to try and again tonight with the planning board. I want to begin with the assumption that Amherst is a town that places a high value on art and culture, and that it sincerely wants a vibrant downtown with attractive, interesting streetscapes. I know, in fact, that we do, because a year ago, the residents in town meeting overwhelmingly approved a % for art bylaw to help in that effort. Other cities, large and small, some in Massachusetts like Cambridge and Boston, Pittsfield and Worcester and East Hampton, have recognized the huge value that public art can play in enlivening their downtown spaces, making them attractive, fun, interesting, lively, and drawing visitors that boost the revenues of retail stores, restaurants, and enhancing property values. I shouldn't have to be making this argument in a college and university town like Amherst, and in my short time here, I've learned that Amherst does indeed talk about these values, and in fact, I've heard some of that talk tonight. But we're here tonight to look at the plans for what I think is the 4th major downtown project by Archipelago. And I know from talking with both Kyle Wilson and Dave Williams that they do recognize the value of public art. However, despite showcasing a lovely sculpture in front of the Kendrick Place building in their promotional brochure, no sculpture was actually placed there. I was told that their plans included some mention of public art at 1 East Pleasant, and I'm not actually clear that that's happening either. except to replace the history mural that had to be demolished to build that project. And I learned last night that a small art gallery that was initially planned for this project on Spring Street, which is a really wonderful idea, will likely be replaced by yet another coffee shop in the downtown. I'm not against coffee shops. I go to many of them. But what we don't have much of in our downtown are places for art and culture. So I don't know the extent of influence or leverage that the planning board has over what projects get approved in Amherst or what parts of them. But I would urge the board to engage in serious conversations with developers at the earliest stages, to pay attention to the aesthetic considerations that Amherst residents have been asking for in downtown building projects, to include a public artist on their project team, and begin incorporating public art into the projects. It's not too late for this one. And the Public Art Commission stands ready to assist in any or all of these discussions. Doing so will not only improve the appeal and vibrancy of our downtown, it may actually help developers sell or rent their spaces as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Shawhan. I live at 52 Blackberry Lane. And this is the first time I've ever come to a town meeting of any sort in 45 years. So, but I felt really strongly about both this apartment complex and the others that have been built. Without parking, I can't imagine who okayed it. And I've complained to all my friends, but I thought, well, I'm singing to the choir here. They have no control over anything. So I just don't understand. We are providing housing for the university, and the residents of Amherst are taking on the expense of providing parking. We are the ones whose taxes go up because we have to have more parking garages, more parking spaces, higher tolls, higher parking fees, and it really makes me angry. And I agree with the comments about Grace Church too. I would worry about that window. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. Anyone? Yeah? And
Hi, I'm Chris Freitag. I'm the senior warden for Grace Church, actually. And I appreciate what's been said, but I know you brought up about the parking and the utilities. And I know we had a project several years ago where we had hoped to take the utilities underground. And unfortunately, it was cost prohibitive. But you had mentioned, or there had been some discussion that there was a pole or we were fed underground. Well, yeah, that's the case, but that pole is almost at Grace Church. So, you know, the utilities would have to come all the way up. And again, hopefully there's grants or something to do that, because the cost to try to put those utilities to the church would be quite expensive, because they have been looked at and we couldn't do it at the time. So, you know, I just wanted to clarify that, because the last pole goes beyond this property up to Grace. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And then I saw hands up over here. Come on up.
Kitty Axelsonberry, 89 Stony Hill Road. So I have some basic questions because I'm still learning. Why isn't this a historical district? Is my first bigger question. It's like it should be. Why isn't it? It could be. Maybe it will be. Okay, I know you can't answer, right? I mean, has anyone ever tried to make it be a historical district?
I know that the Dickinson district is right close by here, but it's farther to the east, so.
And there's
this
probably
hasn't
no
been-
building that's been built since 1870 in between Emily Dickinson's house and this Spring Street.
Police station.
The police station, yes.
But you're right that so there is a process for how one starts a local historic district, and we now have two. And so the first was Dickinson, and it's only a couple of years ago, and now we have the McClellan area. Yeah.
But there's federal historic district and then local historic.
So local historic district,
Right, so
yeah.
they'd be two.
But the common area might be a logical candidate for.
So it's not an official historical district, but I would like the planning board to keep in mind the historic nature of that entire area. Oh, not the Jones, the hotel, the Lord Jeff.
Yeah.
The addition is recent.
Yep.
But it was built kind of in keeping with the historical nature of that entire block. Let's call it a block, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's from the outside, not from the inside. Okay, but this, on the other hand, is like very large, very imposing, very flat. I don't know if windows open or not. There's no little terracing, nothing like that. They're taking away all these they will be taking away the 3 parking spots, but probably more. The images showed people on nice little bicycles with no car and in the middle of the street, as if there were no cars parked on either side of the street. And since there's so little parking, no cars driving around emitting smog trying to find a parking spot, which, is like a big current thing in studies, like how much pollution is there from cars driving around trying to find a parking spot. Also, I think they're asking for a special permit for increased height. Doesn't that kick in affordable housing, where over 21 units you have to have 12% affordable housing?
Over 2 feet. It's over 2 feet.
It's a mixed-use building.
It's a mixed-use building, but it still would have to be over 2 feet.
Oh.
So we haven't hit that 2-foot threshold.
And
right?
it's like 1 foot 6 inches or something that they're asking for?
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. That's it.
Thank you.
I don't like it.
Someone back there? Yeah, come on up.
Mark Kasarik, Precinct 9, Shumway Street. I share Amherst College sentiments about the magnitude and the scope and the encroachment of parking, excess parking would end up on their properties. I'm also worried that some of these cars might end up on the church properties, including the Main Street Church. And I have the personal concern that this adds to the acceleration of the uglification of Amherst. When I walk down Triangle Street, I have to avert my eyes. It hurts to look at the end of Triangle Street. And I'm now very concerned that here's another street I may potentially have to avoid going down. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, come on up. My house. Of course.
Jacqueline Maidana on Leslie Street in Amherst. I, too, am really concerned about the parking issue. I really am upset that this new plan has not taken into consideration the parking issue. It feels like a new patio is more important than parking to these people. To eliminate parking. And also to take what little parking there is on that street, to take that away. I think it's just, I find that unfathomable. I also, I really take issue with these companies that are trying to build dormitories in town. I live in the heart of town. And I think most people in Amherst don't. I live daily with the impact of having so many students in town, between half-eaten pizza smeared into the sidewalks, the pizza boxes, the Solo cups, and the fact that we have Triangle Street and the carriage shops have been destroyed in order to put up another huge complex. And then last night, I was also at the meeting and looking at this other building that's going to be going up into the heart of town that looks like somebody said Chernobyl. I kind of resent the fact that these people want to continue to push more and more students into the center of town. And to claim that it's going to be graduate students, well, graduate students sometimes are married, and they're going to need bigger apartments. They're not going to want to live in 350 square feet. I live in 600 square feet, and that's small. So to live in a hotel room, a young couple, this is not going to be desirable. Not only that, but they're going to be expensive. I really take umbrage with the notion that, yes, Amherst is very reliant on UMass, and we are. I taught there for over 20 years. I got all my degrees from UMass. I love UMass, but I don't want more students partying in town. I really don't. So grad students, sure, but it can be a lot smaller building, they can provide parking, and it can be much more attractive. I really, really hope that you don't just rubber stamp this one, or the next one coming up. I really, really hope that you stick up for Amherst and for the small town quality that we've enjoyed. A lot of tourists come here. They want to see, they don't want to see a city, these high rises. You know, they come to visit their kids on campus. Thank you. I really appreciate you listening.
Thank you. Barbara?
Barbara Ford, 300 Flat Hills Road. And I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this hearing, so I don't know all the details, but I am coming here to support or to ask you not to remove the parking that was, as I recall, was in the first iteration of this building. And I'm not sure whether there was was it double like that the first time? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's the only reason I'm speaking today, because I think you understand the parking issue, and a lot of people have already spoken here tonight to various aspects of this building, which I second their comments. So, but I am very concerned about the parking issue, and that some parking should be contained. I believe they had it underground before, or something like that. So, Michael.
Thank you. I think we've covered everybody. Yep. Okay. So back to the applicant for a response.
So as per my notes here, we can model the shadowing. That's, as you said, is something that can be done. We can show where the stained glass window is. It's not in the stucco building. It's obviously back over here off the screen on the on the main building of the church itself. We could show the street elevation to kind of show it as, you know, Spring Street drops down and our building is at kind of the low point there. We can show it as an elevation to highlight that. And then we can show all the different heights. We could show the height to where the roof starts, the height to the midpoint, the height to the ridge, and we can show that at different spots because it varies. You know, the bylaw defines it as average finished grade at the street, but there's, you know, that's along on this side. We could show it along the west side. We could show it along the east side. We could show it at multiple locations to kind of give a full picture of the height of the building on all four sides.
So back to the board. So there's the public comment, thank you so much. And we got a couple of comments that take us to different parts of the zoning bylaw. So one is a concern that this is a dormitory. So if you're keeping score at home, there is a separate section of the zoning bylaw for the dormitory use, which is, you know, basically not allowed in, you know, this area. It is allowed in one zone, private dormitories of Amherst, but not this particular zone. And then also, if it were allowed, it would also trigger the parking requirement. On the other hand, there's concerns that this might be a hotel, which is also a different part of the zoning bylaw. So, but we are in something that seems to be, you know, to me, it fits the definition of a mixed-use building, which is what the application is. But it is triggering these other questions in part because of the, maybe it's, we don't simply, you know, we have, maybe the zoning bylaw, you know, has to sort of catch up with the possibility of there, you know, being extended rentals, you know, whatever the term is that we're looking for. But the parking question is kind of an important one, in part because there was an earlier proposal that was approved that had parking on the site. I know the reasons that you don't want to do that, but this is the very edge of the municipal parking district. And that's fair, so you're not absolutely required for a mixed-use building to do that. But I too share the concerns of a lot of folks that there's not, so right across the street begins Amherst College, which is all restricted parking.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do have the church, of course, Grace Church itself does not have parking, relies on street parking for, you know, for its events. So there's, and actually, even the Lord Jeff has a parking area, but a lot of the, you know, the people that visit that park on the street. So I'm not.
Town Hall, same.
Town Hall, same. Well, Town Hall
Little
is the
lot,
lot that's right over there, but I mean, well, that's not restricted to Town Hall.
Yeah.
So either we're going to get into a paradigm shift where really literally nobody's driving, or we're going to have this sort of chaotic period where these buildings will come online and, you know, the expectations of where to park is confusing. So, you know, frankly, I would assume that there will be pressure on the lots behind the Lord Jeff to clandestinely park there, or the Amherst College lot. That's a little further down Spring Street, but that, in a way, that's Amherst College's job to police that, yeah?
The letter we got from Amherst College, actually, that was, you had said you had talked to them, so
Yep.
I don't know what came out of that. But isn't one of the items that it was that they wanted in the lease agreement that, or whatever,
In the management
something that
plan.
they wouldn't park in those lots?
Yeah, they want it integrated into the management plan.
Yeah.
Is that what you talked to them about? And
That's just what, we did talk about it. That was their proposal for, in their letter, to integrate that into the management plan. To say that we would actively, you know, work with them to prevent people in their alumni lot.
And were you open to that?
Yes.
I have just one question off the comments.
Sure.
It came up twice. Do the windows open?
Yes.
And are they, like, just pop out, or are they?
So the windows are, per code, the windows are, these windows are all operable, and these windows are, all of these are railings, so they slide open. It's a slider. Yep. So these windows per code they have delimiters. They're only able to open 4 inches.
Okay.
So people don't fall out. with all new construction, that's just the way you do it, above the second floor. And that's why we have these Juliet balconies that you can't occupy, but you can open.
What else came up in the? We do have the design review board. So I was going to say we don't regulate ugly. But we do have the design review board as a extra set of eyes that are advisory, to the planning board. So ugly's in their purview. So, and I might have a different view of what's beautiful and what's ugly, but I much more enjoy the walk down Triangle Street now because I live very close to the Triangle building than I did when it was a weed-filled lot. So, and I walk down Spring Street all the time, and right now it's, a bunch of gravel lots. So, yeah.
Can I ask
Yeah.
So I know it's a different building, but right now you're trying to lease 1 East Pleasant.
Yep.
And do you get many undergrads, or is it mostly grad or completely unrelated people? And how you had 36, I can't remember how many spots you have there, and
Yep.
how is that renting
We have
going?
36 parking spaces, which was the same as when the carriage shops was open.
Oh.
And we have 136 apartments, 135 apartments, excuse me. There's a leasing area. Then we are over 100 leases right now, and we still have parking spaces available to rent
Of the 36?
of those 36.
And so we're talking about 1 East Pleasant.
We're talking about 1 East
And
Pleasant.
the composition of who lives there, to your knowledge, is what?
Is from here to here. So we have.
So what's here?
So here is an undergraduate student, here is a retired professor, family.
So roughly undergraduates?
Former vice chancellor, people who are across the spectrum. And the majority of people are in this middle demographic that we're talking about here. And that's why we've changed the units. That's why we've revised the approach to the building.
So 50% are graduate students, or the demographic are short-term sort of graduate students. You said the majority?
The terms are all 1 year. I mean,
No,
I think
I'm
there's.
just trying to think, like, what
there's-
percentage are undergraduates?
Well, there's two issues in your previous comment, and the one is the length of the lease,
Yeah.
which I feel like we can reconcile, right? Because I think our objective is to be out here at the 1 year lease, and we can resolve that. I think the Airbnb conversation is something that needs to kind of occur at the municipal level. I think the type of apartment that we're seeing the market want is I think that we're on the front end of it because we get inquiries. I mean, we rent a lot of apartments at this point, and we see where people contact us from, how they find us, and who they are. And I think that is, I think it's, people don't quite understand it, but we're seeing what the demand is. We have, the studios at 1 East Pleasant are 400 and some odd square feet, and there's great demand, like I said, so we're looking for that. We are seeing grad students in the past have been, and there still remain, people who come in with families. They're married or they're coupled, they have children. What we're seeing is there's an increasing number that are not. That you used to get your PhD and find your tenure track position. Now you get a 2-year grant here, you go here for 2 years, you're moving up here, you're moving around. They're much more mobile, and we're seeing more of that in the inquiries and the leases that we're signing at 1 East Pleasant and that we hope to sign here.
David.
And just on that, there are 135 apartments in 1 East Pleasant.
Correct.
How many, and I understand there's a range, but how many sort of anticipated occupants in those apartments?
There are 8 2-bedroom units. There are 64 and 63. I don't remember I think it's ones and studios. And there are couples in some of the 1-bedrooms. And then the studios are almost across the board single people.
Huh. The noise was another point that someone brought up because of the adjacency to the church.
Noise is a concern that we share from a management standpoint for, if you also look in our lease as it was with subletting, there's the quiet enjoyment for everybody who signs the lease there. So that's something that we have to manage very well. And it's a residential building. We're behind the commercial spaces on Main Street there. And I don't expect noise to be a problem, as it hasn't, necessarily been a problem in the other buildings we've opened.
So just an anecdote so my wife and I just stayed with friends in Cambridgeport, which is the densest part of Cambridge. And I think it's the quietest night that I've ever had, and I've been all over, but it was exceptionally quiet, even though there's neighbors on top of neighbors. And so we asked, how could this be? And the answer is everyone, once you sort of live that closely to each other, then people basically respect each other. So I think that the noise problems tend to happen when there's, sort of more space and you can set up your amps.
Well,
Yeah, and
I was just going to say, our buildings are very secure. They're fob entry, fob to get on the elevator, and cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
Could you use the microphone, Mr.
Yeah, I'm
Williams,
sorry.
please?
Thank you so much. Yeah.
As I said, the buildings are very secure. We have very tight management. And as I say, there's camera surveillance on every floor and every hallway and all the public spaces. So people know that they've been observed, and we find out that everybody is much better behaved here than they are elsewhere in town.
And I think there's the residential piece. There's also the tenant piece. If it does turn into the cafe that we'd like to see on the ground floor, there'll be those concerns when we come back before you to work with the tenant. And it's also those concerns across the street, right? I mean, obviously that's a hotel with transient lodging and a bar and a restaurant, and I think.
But also tenants that are, lodgers that are paying a lot of money to stay there and don't want to be woken up at 2 a.m.
Understood.
Yeah. So it's 10 o'clock. We're obviously not going to reach closure tonight. So I think that really what we should focus on is, giving direction for the next time, the next time we meet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're from the public, we'll probably keep the public hearing open, and we'll probably have some questions and concerns that we would want you to address, and then we'll figure out a date and time for,
Sure.
To go back through this. So there's a lot of things we haven't talked about yet that have come up from DPW and the fire department, and we can go through all of that.
Okay. And it's my understanding with DPW and fire that those concerns, I didn't see any concerns that were, most of those concerns were to be resolved within the context of
location of the
construction period.
Yeah. But, yeah.
I think one of the concerns that was brought up by the fire department was the setbacks for the propane tank. And I spoke with the building commissioner about that, and he is concerned that the propane tank that's sized, which isn't really clear on the plan, it may be smaller than actually would be needed. And if it were smaller and you did need a bigger one, then the setbacks would be even bigger. And therefore, you would potentially need to move the tank or move the building. So these things all kind of work together. So that's one of the things that we brought up in a list.
Is this on a natural gas line?
So could I just address that really quickly? Obviously, the hope is that we get natural gas at some point because the moratorium can't go on forever. The building is all electric heating and cooling. We're looking at making all the hot water being all electric as well. And so we might be in a position where the only propane required would be for the fireplace in the lobby and potentially in anything in the cafe. So the loads at all of at 1 East Pleasant and Olympia, all of our hot water is propane. And so that's the reason behind the larger tanks. So we wanted to put it on the plan to show that we might have to be in that position. We're not going to know that until we might not need a propane tank at all.
So if you get rid of the fireplace and go back to the gallery, then
we could, and it's tricky because there's huge costs involved.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's, we'd much prefer to be able to tap into the line in the street, gas line.
Just remembered a question. Any thoughts about the public art?
Yeah, I think that it's similar with, you know, if we choose to present this with the power lines and no street trees and all parking, then that planted area that we've proposed up here might be something else. You know, that's a wide planting area. I think that is something to be discussed. I don't think I'd want to build it into our entitlements because we'd want to be able to have say over what that is. If that is on town property, obviously we don't have any say. If it's on our property, then we'd want to have a firm understanding of what type of art it is, so we end up with something that works for everybody.
Should we work on a list? I'm going to read a list of what Chris had given to me, and this, I don't think has gone to the whole board, on things that Chris thought we should see.
Is that in the development application report?
No.
Or is that additional?
This is a list that I sent to Mr. Schreiber as chair of the planning board.
The Access Committee reviewed the previous application to determine the driveway into the underground garage would provide a sufficient drop-off for people with disabilities. The current plan does not have a driveway. The Accessibility Board has not had the opportunity to review the current plans, so that would be something useful before the next time we meet.
Well, the entire building is fully accessible. All the units as required are accessible. Elevated building, no thresholds.
I think specifically how someone would get from a car or a van into the building.
On the town property, in the public right-of-way?
Just in a, Chris?
So again, I spoke with the building commissioner about this, and he was concerned that someone would need to park in the right-of-way and drop someone off who was disabled right in the right-of-way. So he would suggest that the applicant consider how perhaps the sidewalk could be lowered in a certain location, like Amherst College has lowered the sidewalk in front of the Lord Jeff to provide a drop-off area. It's not absolutely required by building code, but it would be a very welcoming thing for a person who's disabled to be able to be dropped off in front of the building and not have to go all the way down to, say, where Churchill Street is, where there might be a curb ramp.
And we're obviously open to that. I think that comes in the same conversation of if that's a designated spot, then it's not a parking space. And it's not a tree, and we can decide what's the best, the best approach there.
There's so much new stuff coming down the pike here, but shared ride, Uber, all that. So I know the parking, we're talking more and more about having to open up some of this parking to be drop-off spots around. And, you know, this is a perfect density place with a lot of millennial, 20-something, whatever, that would probably be using that service. So that's where you get in that zone. It could be a drop-off that handicap could also use, so.
One space that serves three goals.
Exactly.
That could be right here at the end of the ramp.
Exactly.
That could be could be drop-off, could be accessible with the curbing, could be loading for trash, retail, any drop-off for the cafe, and it's just one space, so it wouldn't kill additional parking spaces. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so the next comment was the propane tank. We just discussed that.
May I
Yep.
go back up to, there was a question that we came up with about how did the applicant figure out what the average grade along the front of the building is? And if they could submit calculations to show exactly what spot grades they used to figure out that average grade and show them on a plan, and then submit that to you.
We could do
Would
that.
that would normally be done by the surveyor, right? The surveyor would do that calculation?
Or the engineer.
Yeah, or the civil engineer, okay.
Yeah.
So rather than you guys, but.
And we've got that.
Okay. And then Design Review Board has not issued its recommendation. It's been 24 hours on the revised
Just
proposal.
wondering, can I ask, it's summer, when are you all meeting again?
The issue is that I think the board has more or less determined what its recommendation would be, but it needs to be written up at this point. And then I think it will be approved by the board in email form in the next few weeks, and we'll have a meeting in 2 weeks.
But even a sort of a verbal report would be enough to keep these guys moving?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think
That was
I think there needs to be a
okay.
voted meeting, a voted opinion.
Okay. The proposed site work and landscape in the town right away needs to be clarified. We just talked about that. And Archipelago has 2 other projects as well with previously approved, which had rather vague conditions related to the work that had to happen in the town right away. So more specific language that you should work with.
So could I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
Is there a preference with the board? I mean, what we've tried to show in the past is best case scenario. We're fortunate that that happened with the grant down the street. But should we go the other direction and show the worst case scenario as we talked, which is the power lines and the poles or what is the feeling of the board?
The other option that the poles go away and you don't use the roadway. And
Okay.
what you could do for planting instead there'd be.
On the property line,
Yeah.
maximize parking.
Or, with the sidewalk, if there's, like, before the building, or, like, where could another landscape plan if the everything went underground.
Okay.
And you don't use the road.
So the benefit of that is then, if we show the power lines going away and the power lines end up being $10 million and nobody can afford it and they stay, then the loss would be efficiency in the parking. But it wouldn't be showing a plan that showed street trees that would never get planted underneath the power lines.
So it's sort of like 3 options.
But I think it's just one, right? It's just showing it, the best case scenario with the power lines being down, but with no public way planting, just parking in front of the building. And potentially the drop off for the handicap and deliveries and ride share. Yeah. Okay.
And I think the context drawings that were mentioned in various forms, the cross-section of, in the street wall, the street elevation along Spring Street, showing the building starting with Grace Church and going all the way to the corner of
Churchill.
Yeah. And what else? What are
The cross-section drawings looking up Spring Street or looking down
Yeah,
Spring
yeah, yeah,
Street?
but showing the aspect ratio with.
Right, and you
yeah.
need the buildings on both sides of the street.
Yep, yep.
So looking this elevation. Oops, sorry.
No, looking down Spring Street or up Spring Street, depending on which way you want to go.
Basically a cross-section, and I would take it through.
Cross-section of that.
Lord Jeff, even though
okay.
it's not directly.
But don't you also
those
want
are-
a section down Spring Street starting
And then a
at
section
Grace
down
Church,
Spring, a
going
longitudinal
across
section and a
how the
cross-section.
Buildings relate to one another?
Yeah, yep.
So effectively, yeah, this one here.
Yep.
That would go across Spring Street, and then this one here that would show all of Spring Street.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Who comes up with the estimate of putting the utilities underground? When does that happen?
Go ahead.
So a number of years ago, Mr. Mooring came up with an estimate of about $500,000 to do that work. I think that was prior to the work in Spring Street having been done. So there's already conduit in there, and there are already structures. We're just not sure if they satisfy the latest needs of Eversource. So it kind of has to be explored again, but it may be as much as $500,000.
And I think it would involve an extended conversation with Eversource, with Verizon, with Comcast, and in my experience with them, often that doesn't happen until there's a work order that's filed, and you don't file a work order until there's a project, and so there's a likelihood that scope is determined after a project begins. So that's going to be something that gets juggled during construction, as we're asking for loads for a transformer that would, that would feed this building. The Verizon and Comcast are a little more straightforward.
So just looking through the notes, so parking's come up a lot. I think it'd be really useful to have a written document showing how you'll make recommendations to your tenants about how to find parking. Like where actually will they park?
So what do you tell your tenants, like One East Pleasant, is there a message that what do you tell them about parking?
I mean,
Besides your 36 spots?
Yeah, so far, that's what we've told them, is that there's parking available on site, and a number of people have taken that. And then they're aware of downtown parking permits, and adjacent, the Prey Street lot and the Boltwood lot and a lot behind CVS.
Also, the Golden Place will reserve parking for all tenants in the garage downstairs, which also
Is not full.
and permit parking in the lot for Kendrick Place between the Jones property and
The Prey Street lot
Park-
there,
and
yeah.
the Prey Street lot back there, which has never been parked in before. So now we pay the town X number of dollars for our tenants to park there with permits.
About how many?
I don't know. I think the big flux has been the Mass Mutual, as they've kind of taken on more. I think it went up to, I think somebody mentioned it last night at DRB, it was like 55 at the count when somebody, we didn't do it since somebody first asked.
More bike storage, or bike stands inside, and also zip cars been used a lot lately.
So, but we can do, we'll do the recommendation, and I think we can show a map with potential areas of parking and avoiding potential areas of conflict.
And LPG again. And then the planning department would like an opportunity to draft appropriate conditions for this project, which, we can spend more time on. And then there's some DRB things, specifically, I was at the meeting last night and someone was mentioning the possibility of glare with the south-facing windows into the public space. Things like that. So any other things that we should be asking them to consider for our next meeting, whenever that is? Besides making us proud and addressing all the concerns?
Could I ask when the next meeting is?
Yeah, good question. Yeah.
The next scheduled meeting is August 1st, Wednesday, August 1st, 2 weeks.
That wouldn't be possible for DRB though, right?
Depends. I think DRB meets when they need to meet, and so Maureen Pollock in my office reaches out to the DRB members to find out when they're available.
Yeah,
Okay.
we haven't gotten that yet.
It would obviously, we would, if possible, we would very much like to be on the August 1st docket for the planning board.
And so I guess we should also, we have a list of summer schedule, but everyone here will be around.
I cannot be here on August 1st.
Okay, now we're down to 5.
Good enough because they have a special permit.
So let's see, Maria, Pari, and Rob. Rob, Mr. Reliable,
Yeah.
can watch the tape.
Hi, Rob.
But is that a concern if the numbers we've got for the initial meeting have been met?
Doesn't matter anymore, as long as
Oh,
Rob
okay.
watches the tape of this. Or
Oh,
not.
okay, all right.
He might be watching it. Might be watching it anyway.
One or 3 of them watch the tape and come
Yeah,
to the next.
but we know Pari's will be in France, and Maria will be in somewhere nice also, but if Rob comes, then we'll have a
Would
quorum.
it be possible to move the meeting to the 8th?
I won't be here the 8th.
Consider meeting on a different night, like a Tuesday?
Is it specifically the 1st that's bad for you, or?
It's basically that week. I've
That
come out
week.
of town for a wedding, and it's,
Oh,
31st is going to be a meeting on North Common, so I guess I can't do that.
I would suggest we forge ahead with the 1st, do everything we can to get Rob here, and if Rob's not here, then we can't meet, but the next time for me is going to be, well, the 15th is our next scheduled meeting after that.
I won't be here the 15th. You could still meet, but
Let's shoot for
The
fir-
first
I say we
works
shoot
for
for
us.
the 1st, okay.
let's try for the 1st.
And then the DRB would be as needed in advance of that? Okay.
So anything else any more homework?
Time on the 1st. You already have a public hearing that night on a street tree, scenic roads. So this would be like 7:10 or something. That'd be okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So
Thank
somebody
you.
needs to make a motion to.
Nope.
Pardon me?
Do you need to make a motion to continue?
Oh, we have to have a motion to continue
I
to,
move to continue the public hearing to August 1st at 7:10.
all in favor, raise your hand. It's approved unanimously. Oh, I'm sorry. It's approved, all against? 5 to 1. 5 to 1.
You abstain?
No,
No,
I'm
you
voting
voted no.
against.
Against.
I don't want that date.
Oh, I thought you want us to keep going.
No.
Oh,
I don't want it August 1st. Because I want to be involved in the decision.
We're not done here, so, yep.
May I just make a suggestion? If Mr. Birtwistle has comments that he wants to share with you?
I will.
That you could write
But
to me.
Mr. Birtwistle can dial in. He just can't vote, right?
That's true.
You can dial in, you just can't
I
vote.
can't do that.
But just write a memo.
I'm all about right, so.
Where are you going?
Newburyport.
No, that's, no, it's completely fine. And it's really my wife that's more than a but. Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry that,
So we're not adjourned.
No, we still have page 2.
We're about to adjourn. May I just-
so yeah?
May I just point out that you received a letter from the PVPC regarding the town's assessment? So
Oh, yeah.
that's the last thing in your packet, and it just tells how much the town pays every year to belong to PVPC.
And so we're,
It's the last thing in your packet. I think.
okay.
I noticed we pay more than Northampton, which I was surprised at.
It's because we have a bigger population.
I know. I was like, yikes.
So should we just march through the agenda, or the things that are critical? I did not know during these guys' presentation that there were some letters that had been written about this project. I think that what their concerns of the letters were covered. So just to the letter writers who weren't here, just want to know that we were paying attention to those. So,
There was one more that didn't.
Ms.
Oh,
Keller, Janet Keller?
yes.
Oh, I didn't see
I
that.
emailed that to you.
okay. But let's go through, is there a zoning subcommittee report? Okay. Public comment, old business? And new business, you just talked about the PVC assessment, Form A&R subdivision, upcoming ZBA.
Mr. McCarthy, are you aware of any upcoming ZBA?
Upcoming SPP, SPR, SUB. Planning board committee and liaison reports, anyone? The lights are going off.
Are we still on camera?
I can take a hint. It's okay. Report of the chair. Report of the chair. This will only take 15 minutes. Report of staff. Adjournment. Okay, see most of you August 1st. Who's this? I did see that after all.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, so we've adjourned Amherst Media.